Going to go ahead and call this November 21st, 2016 meeting of the Whitefish City Council to order. Thanks everyone for attending this evening. We'll start with our Pledge of Allegiance, and we will let's have Leo lead us tonight. I don't think I've read these principles for civil dialogue that the council adopted back in 2007, but I sometimes think it's a good reminder to both the city council as well as the folks present listening to public comment tonight. And I'm just going to read through these very briefly, but it's how we would like to conduct our business every meeting. We provide a safe environment where individual perspectives are respected, heard, and acknowledged. We are responsible for respectful and courteous dialogue and participation. We respect diverse opinions as a means to find solution based on common ground. We encourage and value broad community participation. We encourage creative approaches to engage public participation. We value informed decision-making and take personal responsibility to educate and be educated. We believe that respectful public dialogue fosters healthy community relationships, understanding, and problem solving. We acknowledge, consider, and respect the natural tensions created by collaboration, change, and transition. And then finally, we follow the rules and guidelines established for each and every meeting. So let's all hold ourselves to this standard as we proceed this evening and into the future for that matter. With that said, we'll move on to communications from the public. This is time set aside for the public to comment on items that are either on the agenda but not advertised as a public hearing, or anything else you would like to bring to the attention of the City Council. Jan.
Jan Metzmaker, 915 Dakota, Whitefish. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, there were a lot of panicky people in town this past week, all the way from here to Helena to the Frank Lloyd Wright Society over the possible demolition of the Frank Lloyd Wright building. And although I'm very happy to hear that Mr. Ruiz is not going to demolish the building, that really doesn't save it, even though it's on the National Register for Historic Places. So I would like the council and the community to start a dialogue about those places that we think are historic and special and part of the character of our town, and those that are worth preserving, and how we're going to do that. And I hope that you will consider some sort of public forum where we can discuss this and figure out a plan for saving some of the places we really treasure. That's the first thing. Second thing, I was wondering if we've ever received a final report from DEQ about the diesel plume that's below the train depot. We were promised that quite a while ago, and I haven't heard that it's been forthcoming, or if it's been reviewed, or if the city has seen it. And if not, could we possibly find out what the status of that is? Anybody? Chuck? No?
We found out the status about 2 to 3 months ago, and it was in my manager's report.
Okay, because usually, well, I've just been on that committee and I would get emails, but I haven't heard anything, so maybe just a little something for the public would be good. And the third thing, and maybe you've done this already, and it was part of when we had the BNSF forum, and they came and talked about safety and things they've been doing, announcing what the evacuation plan is and how we would notify people if there was an incident, and what is a safe place, and how are you going to tell us via website, or calling people on their phones or sirens. I mean, I have no idea. And I think with all the traffic and the things that are going on with the railroad, it'd be nice to know where the safe places are and where the disabled people and seniors are that might need help, and just letting the public know that that's out there and how we can access it. That's it.
Thank you, Jan. Further public comment tonight? Please. We'll save that for the actual public hearing, and I'll call that, and we'll hold a public hearing at that time. So, any further public comment tonight on items not advertised for a public hearing? Not seeing any. We will stay with the audience. Any volunteer board reports from the audience? How about the council? No volunteer board reports tonight. We'll move to the consent agenda. Any changes or additions to the November 7th meeting minutes, or can I have a motion for approval?
I would move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that carries unanimously. Michelle, we will move on to our public hearings this evening. We do have 5 scheduled hearings. We'll start with item 6A, which is a continuation from the public hearing from 2 weeks ago. Consideration of a request from the Whitefish Hotel Group to amend conditional use permit number 14-11 for the Firebrand Hotel located at 650 East 3rd Street in order to locate a hot tub on the roof, and this is on page 105 of your packet. Wendy.
I don't have too much to add. You folks, of course, held a public hearing, or you opened the public hearing, took public testimony, and then passed a motion to continue the public hearing, leaving public comment open until tonight, so you could visit with the city attorney regarding the letter that was received by the applicant's attorney. And then we also noted that the council does need to act on or before December 1st pursuant to the city code for conditional use permits.
Before when?
December 1st.
Okay. Thanks, Wendy. Any questions for Wendy? Follow up? Jen?
Just before we go to public comment, I'm going to recuse myself. The Firebrand Hotel is a client of ours through my business, Old Town Creative.
Thank you, Jen. Make the record reflect that, please. Any further questions for Wendy? Not seeing any. We did advertise for a public hearing, and we'll keep the public hearing from our last meeting open. You're certainly free to comment. If you've stated something previously, it has been entered into the public record. If you'd like to repeat that, that's fine, but in the spirit of trying to keeping things moving along, if you have stated something previously, you can simply reference that or re-comment. That's certainly your discretion. We'll obviously start with the applicant. Sean, you're welcome to approach and just name and address for the record, please.
Sure. Sean Averill, 697 Armory Road. Well, thanks, guys, for hearing. I know, Frank, you weren't here last time, so I'll hit some highlights, but I won't labor over everything again, John. I first just want to start off saying I really appreciate you guys taking the time to try to get this right. And I know we do feel generally bad that you guys are in this position, and it's not, something we all want to be in, but it's, I appreciate you guys trying to get this thing right. So, I'll just start off, I guess, with, the idea of the downtown hotel has been obviously on the growth policy for a long time, and it's just, the reasons are obvious. It's an economic driver for downtown. As you recall, that block is 19 commercial lots, 7 residential. We just built on the commercial lots for everyone's memory. And, I'm sure you guys are well aware the underlying zoning of those lots could have patios, hot tubs, and no parking. So that's the base where it is. But I really want to just reiterate what I said last time about kind of how we got here. And we entered this thing thinking this was a partnership with the city. And, when we came forward with our plan, it did have a basement pool and hot tub, obviously. But it was the main reason for that, it was a flagged business hotel. And those amenities work for a flagged hotel. You can have a hot tub in the basement. And at city council, it switched. Obviously, we're well aware to get away from the boutique aspect. But, that, I just want to emphasize, that switch is major. And we had to redo all the amenities, we had to redesign things, and we were trying to hit a construction budget to be open this summer. So it wasn't, we didn't know all the amenities that were needed until we got going in there. And so one of the things became obvious is you have to have an outside hot tub. An inside hot tub would work for a national franchise, but it does not work for an independent boutique. You have to have something unique, an outside hot tub. The parking lot isn't a unique amenity, I would say. So once we realized we needed that, we looked, okay, we're gonna have to have a hot tub. That condition can be read a couple ways, and there wasn't anything mischievously going on here. It just said, no additional, I think Frankie, you made the condition, but it says no additional entertainment. We took that as, it's a patio, if people can be sitting around playing cards up there, why can't they be sitting in water, essentially? Is that additional entertainment? We kind of looked at it as, you guys didn't want a bar, you didn't want to have a concert, you didn't want to think. So our attorney kind of agreed with us, hey, you can put a hot tub, there's no rule against hot tubs on patios. Our architect agreed, and then, we had to get clarification from Dave. Maybe Dave's not here.
He's not here.
What happened with Dave, what happened with the Board of Adjustments and the Planning Board, you guys made the condition. They want you guys to rule on it. That condition is pretty loose. It's pretty, we just don't know what it really meant as far as the hot tub. So we weren't trying to sneak anything through. We just thought you could do it after you decided we need it. So I'll just remind you guys quickly, a couple of things we did do. Voluntarily, we moved the building over for the public right-of-way there. Voluntary, I think we're the only building in town that did that. Downtown, it's voluntary, moved it over. We built on the commercial lots, and we really tried to make this thing look attractive. You guys wanted a boutique, we agreed, we wanted to make it look like it's been there. So we think we've been a pretty good partner. I realize that not everyone's going to be happy with this, but the overwhelming support we've got from the downtown merchants is incredible, and half people that work at this hotel live in that neighborhood, and they're excited about it. And I have numerous people that live in that neighborhood that are pretty, think this hotel is great. So I'm sure that, someone's not going to be happy, but, these people bought land next to commercially zoned property, and there could be, the alternative could have been 19 Casey's bars across there. So it's not like those people didn't know what could have been there. It could have been way more impactful. So, we'll keep this brief, but Brian can talk about the sound if you guys have more questions about that. And, they proved it and other things, but I'll be around for questions. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Sean. Appreciate your comments. Brian?
Well, thanks. It's good to be back. First, I'd like to apologize as well. This didn't transpire exactly how we would like it to transpire. It's not necessarily how we like to do things, and I think I know, looking back across all the chain of events, we'll definitely do things different in the future from our standpoint. I do believe that the hotel will be that economic driver that the community wanted in the beginning, and I also believe that it is something that the community can be really proud of. Turned out it's a good-looking building. I think the operation will be a high-class, first-class operation, and I think it will represent us all very, very well in the community. We wanted that independent, we wanted that boutique, we wanted it unique. I think we hit all those classifications. The hot tub, unfortunately, is one of those amenities that you need to make it successful. Frank, since you weren't here, I'll cover the sound test, which is on this graph above you. I'll cover it very quickly. In essence, the sound was the major concern that we heard. Would noise from a hot tub on the roof potentially impact the residential community below? So we went out there and measured the noise that you'd find out there today, and then we put a speaker about like that inside where the hot tub enclosure is, and we turned up the volume to what you'd find on a rock concert, and we compared the noise previously before the speaker was turned on to the noise after when the speaker was turned on. And it's all in that report, but in essence, it shows that there was no noise increase by having that speaker on. And we did that test at the extreme. It was as high as what you'd find at a rock concert. This is the graph where it shows it. So you can see the locations that we compared. The gray represents the noise that you'd find out there today. The blue and the orange represent the noise when you turned on the huge speaker all the way up to max. And that all falls within the range of 55 to 64 dBs, which is all within the normal background noise level that you'd expect to find in that area. So how did we do that? We did that because we put there's a barrier around where the hot tub would go. That barrier absorbs the sound, and then sound diminishes over distance, and sound diminishes in elevation drop. So those three components add up to why people on the street level would not hear that noise that's playing up on the roof. But again, it's done at the extreme, so that's not the sound that you'd expect to hear from that hot tub on a day-to-day basis.
What time of the day did you do this?
They did it at various times during the day, and they did it in the evening, they did it in the day. It's in the packet, but I think there was 3 different times during the day that they did it. The other one, the concern that we heard was the visual impact. There is a picture of it in one of the slides, but we're going to frost all the glass so there would be no visual impact from the school next door, from anyone else being able to look into the building. And then we took and had a gentleman from PKF, which is a hotel consulting company. We asked him to weigh in on his experiences with hotels and hot tubs and the need for a hot tub. And just his letter's in your packet, but a summary of what he said is, based on my professional experience, aside from a lounge and beverage service, an outdoor hot tub is rated as the most important amenity for a mountain resort property with proximity to skiing. He would expect 10 to 20% loss in hotel revenue, which would be a reoccurring basis and could jeopardize the financial viability of the hotel. He goes on to say, in my professional work in mountain resort destinations, I have never encountered a high-quality, upscale, independent, full-service hotel that did not offer a hot tub amenity. And then, back to why we created the hotel was to be that economic driver. There was the relationship. It's for every $1 spent in the hotel would equate to about $9 spent in the community, which would be right around the $26 million for the community as an economic driver. Back to that visual comment impact, you can see these are the glass panels there. Those would be frosted. We heard concerns from the planning board that someone in the school, kids might see something that was inappropriate. When you back up and look, the frosted panels would prevent that from happening. I called the principal of the school just to double check, have you heard anything? Is there any concerns? He said no, and I said, well, you have my name and number. If there's any concerns, please let me know. I guess the other point I'll bring up is we heard a lot about the speaker that is up there on the roof. It's mounted to the wall. It's a background speaker. As I read that condition, it was, don't build a bar like Casey's. Don't hold a concert up there. The speaker is for background music, something that would be appropriate on a patio that you would typically find in a hotel. If that's a concern, please let us know. I'm not in love with that speaker. It just sets the right ambiance for someone sitting on a patio and enjoying themselves. Thanks.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate your comments. Who's next? I do have a sign-up sheet, John Ellis, Nola Howard, but certainly if you're not on this list, it doesn't mean you cannot provide comment. John.
Thank you. I am a member of the planning board, but was not at the meeting in which this came before it. And I was out of town, so I wasn't here when you last considered this issue. But today I did read the packet that's online, and I would like to talk to you about a couple of narrow issues. And that is the letter, first is the letter from the attorney of the applicant. And I would say to you that I believe there's no merit to that position. And I'm saying that as a common sense thing. That letter alleges that the city misled the developers through Dave Taylor to the detriment of the developers. But the emails within that packet prove exactly the opposite. There are a series of emails in there where the developer's engineer, the developer's architect, a representative of the developer, Jeff Bedell, I may not be pronouncing his name right, and Dave Taylor have talked about the issue of whether there needs to be a CUP. These end with the engineer saying to the other people in the email conversation, I think there are way too many inconsistencies with the regulations as they currently exist, and I don't think the explanation provided by the city addresses these. I find it interesting that when Dave first reviewed the regulations, he agreed with our interpretation and said they were not within the Old Town Central District, but now he has completely changed his position. If the zoning administrator is having difficulty interpreting the regulations, then there's obviously still some issues that need to be addressed. To me, there are still more questions that need to be answered. Let me know what you guys think. That was Doug Petmeyer. Aaron Wallace, that is the architect, replies to Jeff Bedell, the Montana Development Group representative, I would review this with your attorneys. From an architectural standpoint, it's out of my hands. So for the developer to come in here now and say that the city, AKA Dave Taylor, misrepresented them just makes no common sense, because they failed to act themselves when they understood there was a problem. I would submit to you that they've either waived or currently is stopped from claiming that the city misled them and they acted on it in getting a CUP. It's not Dave Taylor's fault, because Dave is trying as hard as he can. If they didn't like what Dave was saying, they had two people, one person to come to, the city attorney, and they also had the city council to come to. Nothing prevented them from coming to the city council and saying, listen, do we need a CPU or don't we need a CPU? The city council is the authoritative body of the city. So they've done none of those things, and to have a letter from a high-priced Missoula lawyer telling you that you've misled them, I think your own small-town common sense belies that proposition. If you give them a hot tub, I have a couple of things that I would say. Make them at first waive in writing any future challenges to the CUP. Nothing will stop them from coming here tomorrow or filing suit saying we want the CPU to be voided because we didn't have to have it. If they want the hot tub, let them waive any future challenges to the CUP. Mr. Averill said that both the boards were just passing the buck to the city council. That's not true. The planning board ruled and the board of adjustment ruled. They did their jobs. They're not there just to waste their own time. The second point I would like to stress is, and that goes with what Mr. Averill said, get it right. If you're going to give them the hot tub, make them quit using the residential parking lot as a residential lot as a parking lot. Condition 18 of the CUP says, this plan shall also include screening along the east edge of the parking lot. Condition 24 says, the building shall be sensitive to the residential neighborhood to the east. They've failed to put any screening on the east side. They've done 2/3 of it. They haven't done the last third of it. I have pictures here today showing this being used as a parking lot this month even, and showing you the total inadequacy of the screening that they have. They have some bushes that are ankle height. If they want to get it right, if they're here in good faith, then let Mr. Averill come up here and say that we will continue that fence all the way along the east side, and we will make sure that parking cannot occur on that residential lot, which is it's a violation of the zoning department. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John, for your comments. Who's next? Is Nola here? Yep, please.
Nola Howard, 224 Columbia Avenue, and I've owned that house for almost 40 years. Is this on?
It is. You just have to speak kind of directly into it. Thanks, Nola.
I'll try better. I started studying this noise pollution thing they did, this report, because something in the decisions, what they said came out of it didn't really make sense to me. And so I got into the whole thing of sound and what people hear and how they hear. And what I came up with, and I also called a couple of companies that actually do the same kind of testing. And what I was trying to do is just understand how decibels can explain what we're going to hear. And I guess what I came up with is the decibel testing does not equate to what people can hear. It just doesn't. And that's from University of Georgia, they have a whole wonderful website you can look up if you want to study it yourself. And other places in Montana where they have noise pollution, documentation, what they follow. And then I was studying today, I was just trying to explain this quickly. And I got to the very bottom of this JSM Productions. The very last, he says, since the sounds we are most concerned with in this case are human voices, it is important to indicate that, and this is the important part, just because someone perceives a noise as being louder, it doesn't actually make it louder. And I think that speaks volumes for the fact that the testing does not equate to what the human ear is capable of hearing. The sound testing with the pink noise is actually a single tone at a set decibel at a meter from the speaker. And it is only one tone. It has no volume changes. It is just a tone. In the human ear, you can hear high pitches, low pitches. You can hear intensity, which is loudness. And these are functions of the hearing, but they have nothing to do with decibel testing. The equation, it just doesn't equate. And I saw this written in a number of the reports I was looking at. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm not qualified to try to do this all scientifically, but I can tell you that that is not how the hearing is. Also, we are going from our lot line. It's not from our house or anything. Our lot line is where sound noise pollution begins. And what we're using now in our community is disturbing the peace. And disturbing the peace, we got a little something from I think it was the police chief, just saying, if they're disturbing the peace, cite them. Well, disturbing the peace is exactly that. It's what you hear. And what some of the states, some of the places in the United States have done are they say that if you can hear the bass beat of music, which, by the way, they can't test because that's an intermittent sound. If you can hear the bass beat of music going on, if you can hear people's voices going higher and lower, if you can hear them higher and lower pitch, and then louder and softer, or you can hear actual words, this is noise pollution. And all you have to do, rather than getting decibel meters and going and having, having confrontations about decibels, you call the police, which you would normally do if you're having a disturbing the peace, and the policeman would come, you'd go to your lot line, you'd say, okay, can you hear that bass? And he goes, yep, pretty clear. Can you hear the people yelling and screaming? And they must be having fun, but it's really, this is hard for us to listen to at 11 at night, which, by the way, I think should not be 11 at night. That's too late. So then you have a person who is from the city who says, yep, you're right. Then he could go do his job. And there would be some training involved, but it doesn't involve learning how to do decibel meters. It's a more straightforward what we already have. So, let's see. The 97.5 rock concert decibels, that's the decibels they use for the projection of the white noise or the pink noise. Rock concerts are a whole lot more than that if they're live and you're sitting in the front row. They're more like 120, which is like a million more times loud. This is probably a rock concert recorded and played through a speaker. That's what I'm guessing. And you can set that decibel to 97.5, which is what they did in their testing. But it is not really an oboe. If you play an oboe, a foot from a live oboe, it will play about 95 decibels. It's not as spectacular as it sounds. It's really it's not that loud. And I guess the only other thing that I heard him mention that I wanted to make a comment about was there was a report at the planning board meeting that came of the children being able to see people in the rooms with their light on when it was dark outside, naked. And the kids were actually capable of seeing this. And so that was brought up. And then last week, I wasn't here, but on the 7th, there was a comment made by the Averils that they had gone there at 9 in the morning on a nice sunny day and stood by the school and looked up, and they said all they could see was reflections, and you couldn't see anything. They didn't think it was an issue. Well, it is an issue, and it needs to be addressed, and I would suspect that they're gonna have to do some shading or something on the windows like they do at the hospital. Just something so you can't see in. It's not a big deal, but there is an issue there, and it does need to be addressed. My biggest concern is what was already addressed, is that this is gonna continue to be one thing after another. First it's a hot tub, and then they wanna have weddings, and then they wanna have, people have events that are not guests. It just, I'd like to see it contained. I would prefer it doesn't exist at all. The hot tub doesn't exist, because it's just gonna be a noise source issue. And another thing about sound, it reflects off of concrete, it reflects off of bricks, which means it's gonna go through those 3-foot glass things that are supposed to be soundproofing. There's this much open air, and the sound will just go right through and will then kind of blossom out. It'll go to the school, and what doesn't go through the windows is gonna reflect back to the church and the community. So noise travels, it has a life that way, and it also does bend. There's technical names for it, which I can't recall right now, but noise goes around things, and it engulfs things behind them, and then it continues on. So there's a lot to sound. It's like color and light. It's just very complicated. But before anything is accepted, I think we need to get real clear on how we're gonna control it and what kind of sound we're talking about. I think we already have the sound disturbing the peace. Thank you.
Thanks, Nola, for your comments. Who's next?
Leo Rosenthal, 236 Columbia Avenue, Whitefish. I'm not going to reiterate all of my comments from the last meeting. I know, Frank, you weren't here, but I wanted to reiterate some of them just to clear up some talking points for the decision tonight. Just like Sean, I'll revisit some of the history of this project. You know, we heard a lot tonight, as well as the articles in the paper about the attorney's letter. Averill's claim that they didn't really need a CUP, but were merely appeasing the city by going through the process. I don't think that that could be further from the truth. The zoning regulations for that area allow for structures to be built up to 7,000 square feet. When they came to the city, they proposed the firebrand to be 15,000 square feet, and that's why they had to go through the CUP process. They wanted to build a structure that was twice the size that zoning allowed. So that's why they had to get a CUP. Had they built the boutique hotel that was called for in the downtown master plan, it would have been much smaller and would not likely have required a CUP. So it's because of the size of the structure that City Council went through the process of mitigating for the impacts to the adjacent historic neighborhoods. Now, during that process, the city took considerable public comment, tried to incorporate concerns from the community into allowing the developers to build such a large structure. And in the end, they got their structure. But it wasn't without some considerations from council. So council accomplished this by adding the conditions to the permit. One of those conditions, and the one that we're really here to talk about tonight, number 22, spoke to the concerns that the community had about the rooftop patio and limited the uses to not allow for music, a bar, or any other type of entertainment. At the city council meeting when the CUP was approved, the Averill stood there and told everyone that the rooftop patio would never be anything more than just that, a place to take in the views. This discussion could easily be recalled, as city council meetings are all recorded for video and audio. Then, during construction, we find out that they tried to slip one by the city. They say it wasn't deceitful. I have a different side of the story. They tried to build a very large hot tub knowing that they never were allowed to do so. No plans that were ever submitted to the city ever included this hot tub. And in fact, they stood there and told everyone that there wouldn't be anything on the rooftop. This shows that they were deceitful with their interactions with the city. So after getting caught in their lies, they explored every avenue in Whitefish government to try and amend this condition. The condition was upheld by Dave Taylor, the zoning administrator. The Board of Adjustments denied the request. City planning staff recommended denial of the request. City planning board recommended denial of the request. And Sean says that these people didn't, and groups didn't want to make the decision. They want council to make the decision. That's not true. They all unanimously recommended denial of that request. So here we are tonight at the 4th public meeting on the Avril's hot tub. At last month's meeting, we found out that the Avrils are now going to bully the city by threatening to sue if they don't get their way. This act of desperation flies in the face of all the time and thought that went into the issuance of the original CUP. Those conditions were put into place to protect the community from development of such a large hotel in our residential areas. So tonight, in my opinion, your decision should be simple. Listen to your community, listen to the recommendations by your planning staff, listen to your elected and appointed planning boards, and follow through with the conditions that you placed on these developers. Our zoning and planning laws are there to guide the development of our great city. They're the reason that so much of what's special about Whitefish still exists. By not following your own regulations, you set a dangerous precedent for the next developer to come along. You acted appropriately when coming up with the conditions in their permit and should not be bullied by lawyers about upholding your rules. So I ask again, please do the right thing for your community, uphold the conditions you placed on this hotel, and deny this request. Thanks.
Thanks, Leo. Further public testimony tonight on this item.
Hi there. My name is Angela Flickinger, 676 Trumbull Canyon. I am the general manager for the Firebrand. I spoke 2 weeks ago, and I won't take much of your time, but 2 weeks ago, my focus was the staff, and by not having the amenity, the economic impact it would have on the staff and on the community as well. 75% of my staff are also community members living around the hotel. But tonight, what I wanted to address was the comments of the noise, potential nudity on the roof, drunk and disorderly, being a nuisance to the neighborhood. And my goal and my job is to make sure that every single one of my guests have a great stay. I can't have the frat boys in my hotel running through the hallways and screaming, or the hockey team, that the kids are playing hockey in the hallway. I can't let that go and continue if I want to have everyone, the folks that were there just last weekend celebrating their 60th wedding anniversary. I have to address every single guest. And so we have curfews. We talked about it a little bit in our previous presentations. We have elevator locks, so you have to have a guest key to be able to access the rooftop. We have them going on lockdown at quiet hour. We have security. My staff has been trained on how to deal with drunk and disorderly, kids running through the hallways. This is just part of our everyday customer service. Guests are number one. We have curfew. Unlike the city that does the siren at 10 o'clock, we just say it's quiet time. So, we are trying to be good neighbors. We want to continue the great partnership that we've already developed. And, my name's Angela. I'm in the office about 6 days a week. I want to be that person. If someone has concerns or something's happening, I want them to be able to come and talk to me, and so we can address it. In the almost 4 months that we have been open, I have not had one police officer on duty come into my hotel to have to address any issues. And that is my goal. We want to continue being good neighbors for downtown Whitefish. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. John?
My name is John Franzen, and I live at 12 Dakota Avenue. And this hot tub issue actually is a little bit frustrating to me because I feel like in a lot of ways the fear and what is and what could be sort of overwhelming reality. And if you deny this, you have to ask yourselves, what is the reason for denying this? Is it because hot tubs aren't allowed in that zoning area? There is a hot tub across the street, and it's at a hotel. Is it because there's noise? Well, it's at a very noisy intersection. I can't stand at that intersection and have a conversation most of the time because of trucks. Is it because of potential crazy things that might happen in a window or something? Is that the reason? Well, that might happen, but the reality is that those kind of things happen all the time, all over Whitefish. And if that's the standard that we start setting for our decisions and the basis for our decisions, then really not much is going to be able to happen to Whitefish in the future. It's a little bit of a frustrating issue to me also, just because as a business owner investing in growing businesses in Whitefish, I kind of wonder who's going to come after us next. We've invested and put a lot of energy into trying to build businesses downtown and incentivize businesses downtown. And so we do that with one hand, and then on the other hand, we scold businesses downtown and say, why are you here? I think that it's a mixed message. And at the end of the day, you need to make decisions based on reality and fact and not fear and edge case reality or edge case fears that really aren't based in reality. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Judah.
I'm Judah Gersh, 250 East First Street. I am the hotel's lawyer, but I'm actually not going to give you guys legal advice. You have your own very competent attorney here who can weigh in on that. I'm going to share a little of my personal experience. Just a few months ago, my family and I, we moved downtown. Over 20 years here, never lived downtown before. We now live in the railway district. Little secret about downtown, it's kind of noisy. You start with the train and you build from there. But all this talk about noise from a hot tub in my neighborhood, I learned you got to be more tolerant of your neighbors living downtown. You're going to see them more and you're going to hear them more. The biggest disturbance, I would say, in our neighborhood comes from the restaurants. I don't mean to complain, I don't begrudge them this. But around 11 at night when the hot tub would be shutting down, restaurants are shutting down. And what you hear are the big steel, metal dumpsters. Employees come out, they flip the lid all the way open, a big bang and a crash, they fill it up with trash, they flip the lid back, bang and crash again. There's a lot of restaurants and a lot of that goes on. Do I mind it? No, not really. Does it startle me sometimes? Yeah, it gets my attention. Did a car just crash or was it a dumpster? But I'm tolerant of it because they're neighbors. I said it's done around 11, they're not open that late, and it's fine. So if that's the kind of noise we tolerate downtown, I don't see the hotel and its hot tub being any different. And I just wanted to weigh in on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Judah. Further public testimony. Mitch.
Mitch Brackman, 205 Foxhall Lane. I just wanted to make some points of information. I managed a nightclub, a restaurant in West Hollywood, California on Sunset, and we had noise problems, basically just in the summertime. And the city of West Hollywood had a strict code because we abated on a residential neighborhood. And the basic code said that for a certain amount of distance from our place of business, and the noise reached a certain decibel rating, we were in violation of the noise ordinance. I don't know if the city has a code to that effect at this point in time. If not, I would suggest one. The noise level couldn't be over a certain decibel rating, X amount of feet away, so it would not affect at any evening time after a certain hour the residential neighborhood. We did get warnings from the city of West Hollywood, and the fine would, if we didn't adhere to closing our windows in the summertime when we had concerts there or whatever, the fine was substantial. So I think 11 o'clock is not a late hour. I think if we had a code ordinance as far as what the noise decibel level should be, so we could have the peaceful enjoyment of the neighbors there, I think that could solve the problem. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Bart Slaney, and I live down right on Central Avenue. And I personally think that this is blown way out of proportion. Let me start by reading a couple articles here. If I can get this mic to work. This was a publication on August 25th of 2016. Whitefish resort tax surges with new lodging accommodations. 20 years after Whitefish implemented a resort tax, the city has funneled $30 million to public works projects and property tax relief. 2 decades after the implementation of Whitefish's resort tax, and more than a year after voters stumped the once controversial tax of up to 2%, it's now up to 3%. Collections are surging as the community adds a glut of hotel rooms to its inventory. Montana is one of 5 states without a statewide sales tax, alongside Alaska, New Hampshire, Delaware, and Oregon. Property taxes, or local opinion sales taxes on luxury items and lodging, help tourists demise communities like Whitefish balance the burden of paying for raising infrastructure needs. The idea that the seasonal influxes of visitors place on higher degree of pressure on streets, and public spaces. The local taxpayers shouldn't have to bear all the financial responsibility. There's one example of how a resort tax has helped everybody, including property owners. Leo, and I know you're very passionate about this. Everybody's really passionate about this. I'm going to read another article. This was published November 4th, 2016, just a few weeks ago. The title is Whitefish Resort Tax, August Surge Proves Homeowners Relief. Montana, Kalispell, Montana. We haven't even gotten to Thanksgiving yet, but the Whitefish homeowners got an early Christmas present this year. Turns out the resort tax collections ballooned 27% in August. After seeing the numbers, NBC Montana asked City Manager Chuck Stearns how it affects the people of Whitefish. He said, residents are getting back part of what they and tourists paid. He said this year was a significant decrease in property taxes, or he said there was a significant decrease in property taxes for next year, 2017. I don't know if anybody's read this yet, but paying less in taxes is always a positive thing, Whitefish owner John Saigo said. Saigo has lived in Whitefish for 25 years. That's why it's welcome news when he heard that $118,000 increase in tax resort collections for August decreases everybody's property bill. Stearns said 25% of it goes back to the property tax holders and property tax relief as their property for their tax bill. Bills just went out last week, so hopefully they appreciate the large reduction. Stearns told NBC Montana the city didn't have the exact numbers on hand, but his property taxes are $200 less from last year. The total amount going back to taxpayers adds up to an extra $30,000 compared to last year. Approximately 65% of the resort tax goes into infrastructure. Stearns said the extra funds could speed up the timeline for repairs on Summers Avenue. On how August produced so much extra money, Stearns credits 2 new hotels in town. He doesn't mention who the 2 new hotels are in town, but he gives them credit for raising this resort tax. Shigo says that he's always been a fan of the resort tax. I've lived in Whitefish going on 25 years, and the resort tax wasn't there when I first got here. Since the resort tax has been implemented, we've seen an improvement of quality, he says. Stearns says thus far the collections are 17% higher than last year. So after reading that, I'm not a property owner in Whitefish, but I would be wanting to reach out to everybody who has stuck their neck out and invited business owners who took a chance at putting up a hotel to lodge these outside money that comes in. I'd be patting them on the back if my property taxes were going down. I mean, another deal that we can bring up is the city maybe shouldn't have even told them that that they should have had a parking spot for them. Someone's got to pay for this new parking structure. Make Averill's buy a certain amount of parking spots from your guys' new building that somehow has got to get paid for. As for addressing audio issues, to make it to your address, the human voice runs at around 85 to 300 kHz. The amount that dissipates over even a block to two blocks is unbelievable. You would have to have a microphone to hear anything. For a little, audio is my specialty, and I know quite a bit about this, so that this is even the issue about this hotel is completely mind-boggling. You guys know what sound a hot tub makes? I'm just bringing up some points that if it was me, it almost begs the question if I was sticking my neck out for this and bringing outside money into the public, that they're raising a stink about a hot tub would make me wonder if there's actually something else going on. That's all I've got.
Who's next? Further public testimony tonight? Not seeing any, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to council for a motion or discussion. Katie.
Yes, I'm gonna play it first. Okay. We've heard a lot of different arguments, had a lot of different complaints against the applicant. And what we need to address today is very basic and very simple. They are looking to amend the CUP, the conditional use permit for number 22, to add a hot tub to the use for the patio. That conditional use permit was put, and I was not on council at the time in which it was enacted, but my understanding was that it was put in place to help protect the adjacent neighborhood from excessive exposure to noise. They did allow patrons through administering conditional use number 22 to have access to that roof, which provides noise all in itself. It was not made for entertainment. It was specifically said, not for music, entertainment, or anything other than a patio use. Now it has come before us to argue whether or not a hot tub could be a permitted use and if it would negatively affect the adjacent neighbors. The applicant has gone through the process that has been dictated by Montana State and by City Code, and we are now going through this process. They have issued a sound testing, although it was not with the sound of a hot tub. They did utilize certain aspects of sound decibel testing to try and prove that it would not be as large of a burden to the neighborhood. They are willing to negotiate visible barriers in order to help calm some of the questions as to indecent exposure if someone were to view from the street or from a school, someone perhaps walking around a little more scantily clad than should be. It is my opinion that we are just transferring bodies from sitting on a patio to sitting in a tub of hot water. It is not a pool. My experience in sitting in a hot tub is I want to be quiet. The people around me are far more quiet. If we can somehow, and I will ask staff this question, perhaps put an amendment to the conditional use permit to restrict hours to 10 o'clock as to abide by a noise ordinance. That would be within my suggestion, but I would move to approve adding the use of a hot tub to condition number 22 of the Whitefish CUP 14-11 to install a hot tub on the roof of the hotel. I believe that it will not be as detrimental to the neighborhoods, and that I would also be willing to throw this up for discussion per second on the motion.
Does that motion include directing our city attorney to bring back findings of fact to support that
That would
recommendation to the council?
That would bring back, directing the city attorney to bring back findings of fact for the recommendation of the council to approve the conditional use.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Motion has been seconded by Councilor Fury. Further discussion? Frank?
Yeah, I guess I'm squarely of two minds on this. I'm very concerned about the representations that were made to this community to minimize the community or the impacts on the community of having a hotel of this size adjacent to a neighborhood. There was a long discussion about this when we originally approved the CUP. I have nothing that I've heard today has changed any of those reasons those conditions were put in place and quite frankly agreed to unequivocally and on the record in this hall. The neighborhood continues to be concerned about the impacts of the hotel, and particularly the roof use for guest purposes. I mean, one of the things that I'm concerned about is that we already know, and we have continuing complaints about from the neighborhoods of the sound that's generated from the top of Casey's Bar. This is not a bar, not supposed to be used as a bar, as we all know, given the condition that was put in place. But those noises carry not one block, but 3 blocks and then some. They're of a similar elevation level to where the hotel is. And if the community impacts could be assuaged, I clearly would have no problem with this. I have no problem with the idea of putting a hot tub, and I'm at a loss, and I appreciate the apology that we received from the individuals this evening about this was not their intent, and I would hope it wasn't. But I agree. I don't know how you would otherwise think about a resort hotel in a mountain town without necessarily having an outdoor hot tub. But the whole idea and the whole discussion around this roof and its use when we approved the original CUP was to minimize the impacts on the community that surround it. So that's where I struggle. If I could be convinced that the impacts could be otherwise mitigated and the neighborhood was comfortable, I have no problems. But given the history of this project and the vetting of this project and the community input regarding the project and the promises that were made with respect to this project at the time it was approved, I have a hard time revisiting those because nothing has changed. The hot tub across the street is a totally different animal than what is here. The size is quite different. It's virtually completely enclosed. That's not what we've got here. I'm looking at the picture of the walls on this, and even if you're going to frost them up, my question is, if I can ask, what is the height of the walls that you've got surrounding the proposed hot tub site? 2 feet, 3 feet?
Jeff, if you don't mind just approaching the podium, please, and just name and address for the record so we can get your comments on the record.
The one guy that doesn't need a microphone here. Hi, it's Jeff Bedell, 157 Ariel Way in Whitefish. Currently, the existing surround is 60 inches and the cedar surround is 8 feet. And then there was efforts taken to space the cedar boards and put another board behind it to create more barriers for sound. The end.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff.
Don't have any additional comments at this time.
Thanks, Frank. Katie?
I would entertain amending certain conditions to appease you if you think that there are certain stipulations you would like to add on top of condition number 22, or to further the discussion.
Call my bluff, are you?
No, I'm not. I mean,
the,
I understand, and I agree that this is a very contentious subject because I understand the input from the neighboring communities, or from the neighbors. And I have received comments both for and against the hot tub. I do think it is a huge economic driver for the downtown area. I think that is a wonderful amenity to have. I do believe that it will not be a great burden on the neighborhoods, as has been projected. But I also understand that we do have the ability to try and hopefully hold the establishment accountable for making sure that we do mitigate the noise so that it does not become a burden. And maybe we can do that through working through the amendment to the CUP on condition number 22.
I would suggest that if amendments are considered, that you actually start with a new amendment, not amend condition 22.
Mr. Mayor, may I make a request of both Wendy and Angie? I've got a question for you, Angie, or Wendy. Is there a way, or have we ever in the past conditioned effectively approval of something or anything like this, where if they do not abide by the obligations to, in this case, minimize noise and the impacts, and that it turns out that their sound barriers are not what they say they're going to be, that they either have to change them and or their approval for the facility is revoked and they must remove that facility? Is that something we can add to or condition as if we wanted to approve something like this?
Within the conditional use permit section in the zoning, it does say if they're not abiding by the conditions, there is a process for bringing it back before you folks in order to revoke a CUP. We've never done that before, but I think it lists a process for that.
Okay, but that is something that can be done. Okay.
Chuck?
I mean, you have to also understand the enforcement mechanisms for doing something like that. If you revoke their CUP, the hotel no longer exists, and you get to go close it up.
Now, Chuck, my question was more along the lines of with respect to this particular use of the facility. We're being asked to amend the CUP or add an additional CUP to the use of this facility to accommodate this. I don't think we agreed and the community's agreed that we want this hotel there and we think it's a great amenity. The issue is they want to change the conditions under which we brought this facility into the community. They've made certain representations about what it will do and what it won't do, and my question is, if this thing is approved, can we condition its approval upon their continual compliance, and that their failure at continued compliance over some period of time would effectively revoke, and they would have to automatically then remove? That's my question. Or will we have to go through a judicial process of some kind of character to adjudicate whether or not we'd had compliance or not?
Okay, I found the language here. So yeah, there's in the event of a violation of any provision of these regulations or its amendments, or in the event of a failure to comply with any prescribed condition of approval or stipulation placed on the approval, the zoning administrator shall suspend any conditional use permit immediately, notify the city council and set date for hearing to determine if the suspension shall be lifted or if the conditional use permit shall be revoked. The city council shall be the hearing body. In the case of a revocation of a conditional use permit, the determination of the city council shall be final unless recourse is sought in a court of record.
Pam.
I'm tending to agree with Katie that I would like to see find a way to approve this hot tub, but also protect the neighborhood and their concerns, which we definitely tried to address with number 22 back when we first approved this. So so I would like to explore the ideas of putting conditions on times and noise, further noise, speakers, things like that. I also wanted to ask Angie about the suggestion that we have them waive further challenges to the CUP.
I guess you could make that a condition. I'm not entirely certain that that would stand up in court, but you're welcome to certainly try.
Katie.
I would caution waiving further conditions to CUP, as you don't know 10, 20 years down the road how the area develops and what type of beast the area and the business will be. And so you want to be able to not lock a business into something specifically because of the current times. We need to look into the future.
Pam, I guess let me clarify. If you're talking about asking them to waive the decision that, excuse me, they were required to get a CUP in the first place, I think you could attempt to do that. I agree with Katie that barring them from asking for further amendments to the CUP is probably not feasible.
I would remind the council that this has to be decided upon tonight or the application expires. So if there is interest among the board to explore noise mitigation measures, those added conditions need to be entered into the record tonight before a vote. So if that's the direction the council wants to head, let's go ahead and get the work done here tonight.
I agree we need to do.
Excuse me? Well, if we need you up here, we'll call on you, Brian. Thanks.
Wendy, do we have, is there some sound level that we can tie this to, that we are comfortable with, because we don't have a noise ordinance that I'm aware of?
No, we have disturbing the peace. So that goes through the police department.
And at what level is noise disturbing the peace? Do we have, is there any track record here? I know that's loaded, Angie.
Yeah. We don't have a noise ordinance. Again, what Wendy said is we have disturbing the peace, and there's no decibel set on disturbing the peace. It's kind of an old ordinance, and it actually talks about loud or unusual noises. So there's really no objective benchmark for disturbing the peace. And I think you'll see in your packet that we're discussing tonight, we have a request from at least one citizen to, do something along the lines of a noise ordinance. Missoula has one that's tied to decibels. So, but right now we don't have any sort of, I guess, benchmark to tie that to.
Chuck?
Yeah, and Chief Dial is here, and he could elaborate if you want him to. I think the typical procedure is people call the police officer goes and stands at the complainant's property and makes a determination, does he or she, the officer, think that's disturbing the peace? If he or she thinks it's disturbing the peace, they go talk to the person making the noises. If they can't get them to lower the noises, then they have the citation aspect. So it's, I think, a determination by the officer on the scene as to whether he or she thinks that's disturbing the peace.
I would offer then, given the discussion I've heard this evening, a couple of amendments, or at least an amendment that incorporates two issues. One is, I think, the condition for use of this facility shall be limited to no later than 10 p.m. Monday through Sunday, 365. And that that the noise level that would be allowed would be no more than would otherwise be expected for disturbing the peace caused in the neighborhood. That there shall be, that's all I've got right now.
Let's start with your first amendment. Would you like to add the restriction to 10 p.m. Monday through Sunday, 365?
Yes.
Let's add that as condition. I believe what would be number 25 is a friendly amendment to the original motion. So if you could make that motion again, and we'll see if we get a second.
I move that we limit the use of this, if it's approved, to no later than 10 p.m. On 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
And that would be condition number 25. Is there a second to the motion? That was seconded by Councilor Barberis. Further discussion on the friendly amendment? We will vote on the amendment first. This is not a vote on the original motion. All those in favor of adding condition number 25, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that friendly amendment carries unanimously and adds condition number 25 to the list of conditions of approval. Frank, would you like to rephrase your second point regarding noise level?
Yeah.
Or take a minute to think about it?
Yeah, I'm trying to, it's hard given the circumstances we have. Angie, is there a complaint for disturbing the peace is valid regardless of whether or not we place a condition limiting noise to disturbing the peace?
Correct.
Then I'm not, there's no point in making.
Frank, if we received, if the police received a complaint for disturbing the peace, they would charge it, and it would be up to the prosecutor's office to prove it. I mean, unfortunately, like I said, there's just no benchmark in our ordinance as it exists.
Okay. Thanks, Angie. Further discussion before we hold a vote on the original motion as amended. Frank?
Angie, are we in a position to add a condition to the approval of this amendment to the CUP that the articulated challenge to the original process for approving this hotel as a CUP be withdrawn as a condition of our approving this CUP?
I think you could add that as a condition. Whether or not a court would enforce that, I'm not sure.
Then I would also add a friendly amendment that we add an amendment to this this amendment, or this motion to approve, that should we approve this, that a condition of the approval and is that the hotel owners remove and waive any further challenge to the issuance of the original CUP and the process that they went through to get the approval to establish this hotel.
I'm going to go ahead and repeat that, and then I'll ask for a second if there is one. That the hotel owners revoke and waive any further challenge to the original conditional use process or permit and process they went through to obtain original approval. Is there a second to Frank's friendly amendment, which would be condition number 26? And that is seconded by Councilor Barberis. Frank, would you like to speak to your motion, or Andy?
I guess I just have a question on that, if that's actually something that we would put in a conditional use permit, or if it would be a waiver signed outside of the conditional use.
I mean, you can certainly put it as a condition, whether or not it binds the owner, I'm not sure. I mean, I think a more effective way to go about it would be to ask them for their agreement. And they may or may not give it.
So Angie, what would that look like? I mean, the intent of my amendment is that it would, to the extent it was incorporated in this motion and approved, that they would have to sign an agreement, and a waiver of an agreement as a precondition of receiving the approval. See, I agree. I mean, putting it absent and compelling an agreement from them, or using this as a vehicle for them to be compelled or to agree to sign a waiver, it would be difficult to enforce. Unless, of course, we reasonably relied upon their representation that they were otherwise going to do this, I know. And so that's my question, is my motion appropriately stated, or should I amend it to effectuate what I want to have happen, which is that they sign and submit a written waiver prior to taking advantage of any approval on this CUP.
I think if you're going to make that a condition, you need to make it a condition that is going to effectuate what you want to happen. I mean, I think just saying you waive it as a condition isn't necessarily going to be binding on them.
Okay. So if I might.
Do you want to amend your friendly amendment?
I do.
Okay.
As a condition of receiving this amendment to the CUP, the hotel owners shall provide the city with a written waiver of their challenge to the process and the CUP process which brought this hotel into being.
I'll go ahead and restate that, and then Pam will need to know if that's okay with you, since you were the second. As a condition of receiving this amendment to the conditional use permit, the hotel owners shall provide the city a written waiver to the CUP process, and I will add that was granted on February 2nd, 2015. Is that okay with the second?
Yes.
Okay. Further discussion, this will be added condition number 26 to the conditions of approval. Angie, are you comfortable with that language?
I'm comfortable with Frank's language. I
Okay.
mean, I can't give you legal advice in an open meeting, but I'm comfortable with the language as Frank stated it.
Okay. Further discussion on the friendly amendment. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that carries unanimously as well. Michelle, which brings us back to the original motion as amended to include condition number 25 and condition number 26. And this is a motion for approval. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that carries unanimously as well, Michelle. Thanks for everyone for attending and providing your input this evening. we're going to go ahead and reconvene. We're on item 6B, which is our own resolution 16-60, a resolution extending the corporate limits of the city of Whitefish to annex within the boundaries of the city approximately 82.7 acres of wholly surrounded land on Ramsey Avenue and various other parcels, and this is on page 257 of your packet. Chuck.
Yes, the resolution is on page 257 of the packet. My memo of extension of services and impact and service report is on page 271, so I'm going to mostly refer to that. After I just briefly go through that and touch some of the high points, I want to address you received several letters, I think 2 in the packet, including a 12-page letter, and then one on your desk tonight, and also can respond to questions or comments that come up at the public hearing. So this proposal is to annex 44 properties around the city of Whitefish, including a number on in the Ramsey Avenue area, but various other parcels around the city. 34 of the properties are taxable, 10 properties are tax exempt, of which 6 properties are either right-of-way or MDT stormwater detention pond. There are maps in the packet and also a spreadsheet showing the impact on every property owner, future taxes. And of course, this does not affect their taxes this fall. If you annex tonight, it would not affect their taxes until November of 2017. The city has an extension of services plan that was adopted on March 2nd, 2009 by Resolution 0904, and it's on the city's website with the link right there in the memo. The council met on a work session in March of 2014 and again on July 5th of 2016 to discuss extension of services and possible areas for annexation. At that time, earlier in 2014, the highest priority was Houston Drive, but that's in litigation right now. And then the council said do West Lakeshore as the number 2 priority and the Ramsey area and other properties as the number 3 annexation priority. This annexation is being pursued using the wholly surrounded method of annexation in Montana state law. Each annexation you have to specify a certain method of annexation, and they're separate. One aspect of wholly surrounded annexations is that the protest is not available. People can protest, but the city council can choose to override or ignore the protests. A number of the properties in this annexation are on water or sewer, and that's in the report as well. We'll get to that in a bit. There's an Attorney General opinion that helps clarify the definition of wholly surrounded, and there's been a Calvert lawsuit that Angie has cited from out of Great Falls that provide additional clarification. The memo then talks about the schedule, and of course that schedule culminates tonight with the public hearing, and if the council wants to adopt a resolution of annexation to annex the properties. An annexation under this method requires a plan and report on extension of services, and this goes through how we'll provide services to this area. As I said, sewer and water is generally available throughout this area or close by. Many of the properties have it available. That's the biggest municipal service. It's not an obligation of the city to extend water or sewer to their property. When water and sewer are not available to a property, the property owners or developers bear that responsibility and cost. The city can often help out by issuing a special improvement district bond so that everybody pays their fair share for the cost of extension of those services. The memo talks about electoral services, municipal court, administration, legal. Those are all becoming available. One aspect is since we lost the extraterritorial zoning jurisdiction, Right now, they are zoned out in the county, and if they're annexed, they would now become subject to city zoning, and we would initiate city-initiated zoning for those properties. And then they would also have to start paying building permits for any projects or planning and zoning permits. They would benefit from better police service so that police would be the first responder to their complaints rather than the Flathead County Sheriff. Of course, under our mutual aid agreement, the police generally would respond to an emergency situation until the sheriff can arrive, but the sheriff would take care of less non-emergency issues. Fire really doesn't change. A lot of times we get comments from property owners, okay, if my taxes are going to go up 18 to 20% for a house, and sometimes even higher for vacant land. I think you've got some comments that the vacant land would go up 73%. That's also high in percentage, but it may be low in dollar impact, or relatively low in dollar impact. If they're annexed, their ISO fire service rating might go down, and they might get a reduction in their property insurance rates. Ambulances, really unchanged. They would benefit from the discount that we give to city residents and property owners, residents, $200 discount off of ambulance. Public Works, I talked a little bit about. This says there are 16 properties already on the water or sewer system. Those that are already on, their monthly bills for the base rate would decrease by about 10.27%, and their monthly rate for quantity of water used would decrease by 27.49%. That equates to about $11.53 per month for an average household. It's not a whole lot in the face of significant property tax increases, but it would help because we have a surcharge on their rates as out-of-city water and sewer customers. Garbage collection generally doesn't change. It's still provided by North Valley Refuse. One aspect is garbage service is now mandatory, and we had some of that in the comments that some of the people down there currently take their trash and garbage to the landfill directly and don't provide their own service. We have found that in order to make sure it's fair for everyone, we bill everyone in the city for garbage service, whether they're in town and using it or not, because the trucks still drive by their property every week and are available to pick it up. Parks and Recreation, that's one of the services that we feel they already benefit from. They probably come into Depot Park and some of the other parks, City Beach, use those properties, and they don't pay for those if they're paying county taxes. They would only pay for it in the city. Library is similar in that right now county residents would be paying for the Flathead County Library and not any benefit to the Whitefish Community Library until such time as they're annexed. Our extension of services plan that's on the website was upheld by the Montana Supreme Court, upholding the 1998 annexations, so it has already been subject to review and approval by the highest body in Montana law. I say that property owners typically face a 16 to 28% increase in their tax bill. Some for vacant land are higher than that, and the chart and the spreadsheet in the Exhibit A of my memo shows each property's impact. Going on to some of the comments, Jerry Hansen wrote a 12-page letter. I believe it's 12 pages. Jerry has a lot of experience in this area, having been on city council and having done some consulting. He's got a lot of truth in his letter. I also think it's somewhat biased and incomplete. I'm not going to belabor it, but I'll go through some of the important points. He says that county residents already pay city services because they pay higher taxes for the schools in the county because of the TIF. As the council knows, we hold the school district harmless for the TIF, tax increment funding district, by our agreement to rebate TIF revenues for all the residential properties to them. So their taxes for the schools are not affected by the tax increment district, and that's more than 50% of their tax bill. For the county, I just say that there's a lot of problems with county taxation. City residents pay double taxation for the sheriff, patrol, for 911, for weeds, for justice court, because we have our own municipal court. So I don't get overly concerned about the county because of the double taxation that they subject our citizens to without those services being provided. Streets, Jerry makes the point that they pay resort tax when they come in. That's true, and that pays for only reconstructions. It does not pay for plowing, maintenance, overlays, potholes, etc. That is all done through the gas tax, which is based on miles of road and population, and our street maintenance assessments, which are only subject to properties inside the city. Library I already talked about. Police and parks, there's really no payment that they would make for our police and parks. Finally, Jerry talks about the low income issue, and I think that's subject to some of the other comments the council have heard. I think that's true, and it may be an impact. I also state and feel that the city council has many current constituents who are low income or fixed income that you have to worry about, and this is really about fair share and equity. When people talk to me for my increase in taxes, what am I going to get? They don't like to be told, but I've always been a straight shooter that, well, you're already receiving most of those services, so now you just get to pay for them. That leads to some of the disparaging comments that I, as the messenger, get to receive, but really that's the perspective. They do receive a lot of services by their daily use of city roads and city services, parks, library, etc. And we believe on equity basis they should start to pay. Jerry said we didn't come out to the property owners and meet with them. We go way beyond what state law requires. State law does not require us to do an individual tax assessment analysis for each property. We do that. We mail that to them. We're not required to mail that to them. We do meet with the property owners. That meeting occurred on September 22nd. And that's not a required meeting. That's an early meeting to answer their questions, understand their concerns better, and try to listen to them. It's tough because when you meet with these people, many don't want to be annexed. And when you talk to them about paying for services they already receive and try to get their buy-in, that's often sort of a naive and fruitless endeavor, but it's one that we do anyways. If you wanted to buy into Jerry's argument to delay the annexation, you could still pass the resolution and put a delayed effective date into it, say of January 2017, and then their tax bills wouldn't go up until November of 2018. I think that just prolongs the equity question, but it would address some of his comments. On your desk tonight, you received a letter from Mr. Higgins. I've got his property up here. I did talk with him about access to, oops, yeah, I'm going to have to undo that. But he is complaining. Let me get it over to his property here and see if it shows up. Yeah. So his property that we would annex under wholly surrounded is right here. I'm going to enlarge it a little bit further even. Yeah, I'm going to come back a little bit. That's a little too much. We're also annexing Good Avenue because for some reason this section of Good Avenue was left out of the city a long time ago. But this is his property in question that would be annexed. It's under the legal name of Crystal L. Higgins, but the Higgins also own this property here, Crystal L. Higgins, and this property here. So he's trying to say that this parcel does not have any legal access because he currently comes over this property without an easement. It just has an understanding with the property owner. And I tried to explain to him that, you know, if it were ever challenged, the courts, I think, would understand that he has legal access because he owns this property and this property. I said, you might not like that access, you might like the access that travels over this other person's property, but I think any court would find that you do have legal access to this property and you just have to exercise that access. He said, well, I can't tear this house down, and you know, I mean, there's probably room there for a driveway, probably room here for a driveway. It might not be desirable or efficient for him to get access to the property, but I tried to explain to him I felt he had legal access to his property, and we could annex it. Obviously, he didn't agree with my interpretation. So those were the comments I had on people's letters that they wrote, and I can answer any questions now or later as you hear more public testimony.
Thanks, Chuck. Any questions for Chuck on the staff report? Not seeing any. We did advertise for a public hearing, and we'll hold that public hearing now on resolution 16-60. Any public comment this evening? Ma'am, yeah, just for the record, your name and address, please, when you come up to the microphone. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Angel Dominguez, and I live at 510 Ramsey Avenue. I actually am for the annexation and came tonight because I wanted to make sure that you realize that some people would like that annexation. I have 3 reasons that I'd like to state, and just from walking around the block every day. The first one is that at one of the county homes, there is a raw sewage smell. It's more prevalent in the summer, but it is also there even as I walk around this week. I don't know, based on Mr. Stern's comments, if that would be addressed, but I know that at least being annexed into the city, it would be easier to get it addressed than the county. Secondly, there have been cars that are abandoned in the front yard. I have there's a county home that has 3 to 4 renters at a time. Those renters overturn on a regular basis, usually 4 to 6 months. There's new ones in there. About 12 renters ago, there was a car that somehow caught on fire. The engine was thoroughly burned out. The windshield was broken. All the windows were broken. The renter left. They left it in the front yard, and it stayed there for over 3 years. But the third point, and the one that affects me most personally, is that last summer, my next door neighbor is a county home. I am in the city. Last summer, the renters that were there decided that they wanted to get additional income. So they had a person that lived in a trailer. They pulled the trailer into the front yard. They backed the trailer up to my property line. That person lived in that trailer at the beginning of the summer. I asked them to move it because that back of the trailer was less than 10 yards from my front steps to my front door. So they did not comply. They left the trailer there. The person lived there. I called the city of Whitefish and the city of Whitefish said, well, 30 days, they've got to move it. Then I realized, oh, they're in the county. So I called the county of Flathead, and they said that there was nothing that they could do. So basically, I put up with a person living in a trailer that was 10 yards from my front steps. I did not appreciate it. So in summary, you know, I think the city council should be applauded because you guys have done a great job in your vision of making Whitefish a great place to live. From the 7th Street to the Sky Park Bridge to your foresight with respect to all the bike trails, the Whitefish Trail, you know, I really applaud you on your vision. All I'm asking is that you bring Ramsey with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Angel. Appreciate your comments. Further public testimony? Go ahead and close the public. Oh, Don.
Okay. You guys have heard a lot of these arguments, so I'll try to be as brief as I can. Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, my name is Don Kaltschmidt. I live at 230 JP Road in Whitefish. I currently have before me 2 opinions, and Angie was kind enough to thank you to give me a written opinion on her evaluation of the property, and I'm here to speak on tracks 3B and 3BD with a late comment on the whole annexation. So the two opinions that I have with Frampton and Angela's is that they do contradict each other, and that doesn't surprise me with attorneys. They often have that, and that's why courts sort these things out. Both of them, interestingly enough, quote the Calvert, and even our city manager just quoted Calvert. But what was not addressed in Angie's letter, but was in Sean's, is the rural fire district versus the city of Missoula, 283 Montana 113, etc. You can refer to it in Sean's letter, in which he doesn't think that the prongs are, that you have to have a two-prong thing, and Angie has a different opinion on that. But there has been cases apparently on this. But putting all that aside for just 1 second. We'll take, the lawyers will argue what they argue. Let's just use common sense here for a minute. My property isn't wholly surrounded. It's not. To the west of my property is county, and it's not wholly surrounded. Now we can argue if it, this method or that method or anything, but I think at the end of the day, the council needs to look at this property is not wholly surrounded. This law was put into effect with the name wholly surrounded. It is not wholly surrounded. I had property where the Subaru building is currently located, and the city annexed that in. I didn't fight it. Why? Because I looked at it and I go, no, I guess it's wholly surrounded. It was. So I didn't argue the fact. I have no desire to fight in court with the city. So I propose a compromise to annexation that would be mutually beneficial. The way I understand it and the way I've listened to and read your comments on this issue and other issues, and when the city lost their lawsuit with the county, I understand that the city wants to make sure they have control over the properties that are within their area, mine being one of them. I understand that completely. The thing that I would propose in my property, and also the ones that are controlled by the Averils, and I've had comment, the Morrises owns it now, but the Averils have a buy-sell on it, is that we work with the city on a neighborhood plan. I do not think there's any reason for either one of those properties to be annexed in, because the highest and best use of that property is to come into the city. We're not going to develop that property in the county. It would not be the highest and best use. There's quite a bit of commercial for that property that would require city services, city sewer, city water, etc. It doesn't currently, though, with the two structures there's a house, and then there's a funeral home, and then there's a parking lot. All would be, are fine with city. There's nothing that's on that property that is against any city ordinance. It would be fine if it was in the city, because there's not been anything addressed that way. So what I'm saying is it's functioning properly. Everything on there is that's zoned. It's in the right zone. It's commercial, and there is no difference whether it's in the county or the thing. The thing we're concerned about, our family's concerned about, is our, Chuck quoted some percentages and everything, and we're one of the ones that have a lot of vacant land, and our taxes are going up $5,000 a year. Now, that's not chicken feed. That's a lot of money. I know it'd be a lot of money to everybody sitting on this council. So our proposal is we'd like to work with the city and come up with a neighborhood plan that could be mutually agreed upon, and that we come up with something that be a win-win for both, because we're all kind of on the same team. We all want the city of Whitefish, whether the people that live in the county or the people that live in the city. We all are want what's best for the city. The other thing I wanted to address, my friends, is this. I have found in my life, and I'm 60 years old now, that, and I've been in different places in my life. When I was in my 30s, I wasn't quite the same person I am today. But forcing your will on another person or people is not a good use of time and resources, in my view. I think we have a lot bigger fish to fry in the city of Whitefish than this. I propose that you work with each and every landowner that you're considering annexing and see if you can find something that can be mutually negotiated to be a win-win for everything. Because let's just say you go through what you're going to go through. You may end up with some lawsuits, you may not. You may end up, but what you are going to end up with is hard feelings from your neighbors. So if it was me doing this as a business person, and what I've learned in my years of dealing with individuals, is that nobody likes to be forced into doing anything. Just because you can do it because of state law doesn't mean you have to do it. Now, I'm not saying you don't do it in some cases, but I think you can negotiate some things with the people. Maybe you put it out a couple of years, you know, if they are really wholly surrounded or whatever. Try to come up with a win-win situation so there's no hard feelings. You could take with your city staff and go visit with each and every one of these people. And I understand if you can't come up with something, I know there's people that you can't work with, but I'll bet you the majority of them you can. So I would propose that you look to do that. As I said, everybody's here that wants the best for Whitefish, and I would really implore you guys not to impose your will on others, but rather to work with our friends and neighbors. And I ask you for tonight to reject the annexation and to further mull over some of the things that I threw, and I'd be happy to work with you and give you some of my ideas, but before I do so, I'd rather, you know, wait to see what your decision is. But I wanted to give you a 50,000-foot view rather than a specific thing, because I want to hear what your issues are. I think I know, but I'm not positive. So what I understand is that maybe the tax thing isn't as big a deal to you as the control of the property. So I think we can work this out together, and I appreciate your comment.
Thanks very much, Don.
Hi, John Wallace, 246 4th Street West, Whitefish. I tend to agree with Mr. Kohlschmidt about the individual assessment of each property owner. I think that you should at least talk to them instead of as a whole, individualize each other with the certain parameters that you're asking, and maybe ask what their personal hardship would be with this new annexation. Excuse me. So I just don't understand one thing is the Holy Surround Law. Now I look on the map and I see that Ramsey is not owned by the city, it's owned by the county. So how does the city take Holy Surround if you're not surrounded as of yet? I kind of question that. The other thing too is the Houston Drive issue has not been resolved, and that was on the docket many months ago. If that's not been decided yet, how can you move on to another decision to annex more properties when you haven't even fought that battle as of yet? I think you should wait until the Supreme Court has decided this and then make your decision based off of that. Like I said, I agree with Mr. Hansen and Mr. Kohlschmidt about the individuality. They should talk to the landowners. My grandparents bought that property on Ramsey in the 30s. We've been there since. It's an adjoining property on Fraser that I own now. I think we've been grandfathered and we've paid our taxes for many years. My folks, my grandparents. So I mean, I don't think the issue about the taxes is such a big thing. Other than me being disabled and unable to create more income to pay for this increase in taxes. My taxes are set to go up $800 with this annexation. That's just something I can't do anything with, or I can't do anything without. I just have to do it. I just want to say my taxes in the house there that I'm at, which is on Fraser, not Ramsey, but my sister owns property on Fraser, or on Ramsey. In 2015, my taxes were $472 for a year. 2016, they were $2,208 because the assessor came in and reassessed for the buildings that have been brought in there, new housings, $1 million houses that are up in there now because it's by the golf course. And now with your proposal of this annexation, my taxes will go up to 29, almost $3,000, which is, I mean, that's crazy. In 3 years, that's quite an increase of taxes. I mean, on a fixed income, I don't know many people that could afford that. So the other thing I don't like is the restrictions that the city brings. We've worked that property for 70 plus years. We've been able to burn our rubbish, our trees. We've got heavy trees there. If you look down Ramsey, if you come down Ramsey, you see that's the only existing trees that hasn't been attacked or torn down and built on. So I think we should be grandfathered in. We should be able to burn our own trees and our own limbs that we want to instead of having to haul it away and spend the extra money. We've been there 70 plus years. I think we've already paid our taxes worth. That's the other issue too is you say we're using all your amenities. Well, we've paid since the 30s for all these amenities. And it just seems like you're after one thing, and that seems like money. It just seems like the city council is just looking for more money for the city. And I understand that too. So, I mean, progress is progress. The one thing I do want to say is I think the individual landowner should be given the option of when he wants to come in, not forced to come in. I just don't think that's fair. I don't think that's American to be driven that way and just told what you're going to do. I think we should be at least, and I appreciate letting us stand up and protest at least this, because according to the Holy Surround, we shouldn't be able to. But I don't think the Holy Surround has been achieved yet, at least not for me, at least not for Fraser, because I see Ramsey has not been annexed. There's still county road there. It shows on the map what I'm seeing on the map wasn't really clear is the entranceway to Ramsey is city, they say, I guess. I don't understand the map. And then the backside over on Master's Court or Master, I don't remember the name of the street now. I think it's Master Haven.
Master's Court.
Golf Haven Drive, I see that as being city owned. So how can the city own something that's already been, it's showing that it's not owned yet, it's to get there. So I don't feel that I'm wholly surrounded. It just doesn't seem that way. It doesn't look that way on the map to me. So that's just one of my things that I don't agree with. So other than that, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. Appreciate your comments. Yes.
The only thing I would like to comment is that it was fine to burn wood when there was only one property on a big, large acre, but now if you go on Ramsey and Fraser, they are building townhomes, condominiums, where there are multiple properties, so the density of it, I mean, I personally don't want to have to be breathing smoke that the gentleman may like to feel like he has a right to do. So I think the density now dictates that you need to respect the people's health and approve Ramsey. Thank you.
Thanks, Angel. Further public comment? Not seeing any, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for a motion or discussion. Andy?
I would move to approve resolution 16-60.
Is there a second to the motion?
A second.
There is a motion to approve resolution 16-60 that was made by Councilor Fury, seconded by Jen Franson. Andy, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, I guess just a couple of comments. I appreciate, Don, your comments. John, I appreciate your comments, and Angel, I appreciate your comments. And I think that to try and go out and negotiate with every property owner in every annexation, given the amount of staff that we have, the amount of time we have to do that, and knowing that 99.9% of them are probably gonna go, no, well, we'll just delay until we feel like it's right. Well, that probably is a time that's not gonna be right for them in our lifetimes, unfortunately. And people always wanna think that we do this because of the revenue that we get out of it, and that's probably the lowest priority when we look at an annexation. Efficient provision of public services to our community is one of the top items that we look at. And if you look at, we don't have an overall map of the city up here, but if you look at our corporate boundaries in this community, you realize just how messed up they really are. And Ramsey's a great example. If we look at that one little pod of lots that are in the middle, completely surrounded by city, and it is wholly surrounded by state laws, according to our city attorney. It's not efficient for the county to provide service there. It's not efficient for us to try and back up the county to provide service there, particularly for emergency services and those kind of things. So I think we look at things, as Don says, we do look at that 50,000 foot view, and we look at not just today, we look at what's gonna happen 5 years from now, what future councils are gonna deal with, what future emergency services personnel are gonna deal with, what future public works people are gonna deal with, and those are the things that we take into consideration, and we don't do it whimsically. We don't do it without a lot of thought and a lot of consideration about the impact, because we understand that it does impact people. But I think we do it in the best interest of the community as a whole.
Thanks, Andy. Further comments from the council? Frank?
Andy, I agree with everything you said, and I'm also very sensitive to the impacts, the economic impacts, which I think are the things that concern most of the people that we've talked to this evening, and the immediate impacts of those, the immediate effects of those impacts. I would, and with respect to the fact, and I agree with you, our goal in these annexations really is not revenue, it's other things. There are other more important reasons for us to do annexations and for these in particular. I would like to offer that we delay the impact of or the effectiveness of this annexation until January of 2017. If we did that, these properties would become part of the city shortly after the first of the year. However, the impacts, the tax impacts, the cost impacts to these property owners would be delayed effectively until 2018, which would, I think, no good deed goes unpunished, I understand, or goes unpunished, but, and it may be too little too late for some people, but I think it would do two things in terms of it would soften some of the impacts. And I think at least I would have the fig leaf to hide behind it. It really isn't about the economics or the additional taxes that we're looking to do these annexations. And so I think we could offer that to say, no, we hear you. We understand that's a big issue for most of these properties. And I would probably say the primary issue for all of the properties. And so I offer that, if I could get a second, that we could delay this annexation until January of 2017.
Is that a friendly amendment, Frank, to the original motion? Is there a second to the friendly amendment to defer annexations till January 2000, what would be 18, correct?
No.
17, excuse me.
The effect would be 18.
The effect would be 18.
Or the economic effect would be 18.
Right. Is there a second to that friendly amendment?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councillor Fury. Further discussion on the amendment? Chuck.
It's not, in our present situation, that would not be a huge impact. Generally, by going from January 2017 to November 2018, when their taxes would first show up, you're providing free services for a year and 3 quarters. But we're already providing most of those services probably without the effect of police. I mean, there could be some more police calls down there, and maybe some code enforcement issues, I guess, as we've heard tonight. So you would be providing services without the revenue until 2018. Again, as you've seen in the report and as you've stated, it's not a large amount of revenue, and I don't think it's a large amount of services. I just wanted to make you aware of that. I'm not advocating that you not delay it till 2017, but if you did this in every annexation, you'd be providing a lot of services without revenues for a year or more. But
I have a question for Angie. Not stating in principle that I don't agree with the friendly amendment, Frank, but considering this is our second minor annexation, I would refer to it as, and we didn't offer a delayed annexation to the first round of properties that we annexed that were wholly surrounded that existed on 93 South, and I believe we did one other. Isn't that correct, Chuck?
you did West Lakeshore earlier
And West
this year.
Lakeshore. Are we acting arbitrary and capricious by extending this to these properties?
And Frank, you can correct me if I'm wrong. When we did the West Lake Shore annexation, I don't recall having quite as much public testimony about the economic effect of immediate annexation. I don't necessarily have a concern with the fact that we're providing services for another year and a half without them paying for it. I mean, clearly we've been doing it for years and years. I don't see a problem with that. You're going to have to state some findings why you consider this different than West Lake Shore, and I would encourage you to do so if you do intend on delaying this annexation.
Okay, thanks, Angie. Further discussion on the friendly amendment? Frank, if I may add, if you don't mind adding to your friendly amendment, giving direction to Angie to bring back sufficient findings of fact to support your proposal. I'd like to see that written into the record.
Yes, exactly. So moved.
And that's okay with you, Jen? Did you second the friendly amendment, or Andy did? I'm sorry. Is that okay with the second? Okay. Further discussion? We'll vote on the amendment first. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign. And that carries unanimously.
I voted opposed.
Andy voted opposed, excuse me. Let the record reflect Andy voting in opposition to the friendly amendment, which brings us back to the original motion as amended. Any further discussion? Chuck?
I think if you want Angie to come back with findings of fact, then I would just probably continue this resolution to the next meeting. She can put the findings of fact right into the resolution, because once you pass the resolution, it's...
That's right, there's not a second...
Of record.
There's no second reading on this.
No second reading. But that's... If the intent is to delay until January, actually you got till January to enact it, or as long as you want. So it's not critical at this point, but you could continue it to the December 5th meeting, or even go to the first meeting in January. But that would, Angie could just put those findings of fact into the resolution.
Okay. Do you need a motion to that effect? Or withdrawal
You
of
would
the
have to
original?
continue.
Okay.
Continue it to a date certain.
Okay. I'll leave that up to Frank to decide.
Then I would request that we, given the approval of that amendment and the fact that we do want findings of fact that would support it, I would like to move that we delay further action on this matter until the first meeting in December, our next meeting.
Is there a second to that motion to continue to the December 5th meeting? Seconded by Councilor Barberis. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that carries unanimously. Thanks, Angie. Thanks, Chuck. Brings us on to item 6C, which will be ordinance 16-19, an ordinance rezoning approximately 1.31 acres of land located at 2045 Lion Mountain Loop Road in Montana, Flathead County, Montana, from County R1, which is suburban residential, to our own Whitefish WSR, which is suburban residential district, and adopting findings with respect to such rezone. Bailey.
Good evening. So as the mayor stated, this is a request by the city of Whitefish to rezone one parcel from County R1 to City WSR. As the mayor stated, the subject property is located at 2045 Lion Mountain Loop Road. It totals approximately 1.31 acres. It was annexed on October 3rd with Resolution 1653. There is a comparison of the two zones in your packet on page 310 if you wanted to look at those. We did mail a notice to all the adjacent landowners. We also placed a legal in the paper on October 5th. Staff is recommending approval of the rezone. The planning board met on October 20th and considered the request. No members of the public spoke at that time, and I did attach the draft minutes to your packet for you to view. Actually, it'd be approved now because the planning board meeting was in November, or just recently. Following the public hearing, the planning board did recommend approval unanimously for the rezone and adopted the findings of fact. And I can answer any questions that you may have.
Thanks, Bailey. Any questions for Bailey from the council? Not seeing any. Thanks. We did advertise for a public hearing on what will be ordinance 16-19, and we'll hold that public hearing now. Any public testimony? Not seeing any. I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for a motion. Andy.
I would move that we approve ordinance number 16-19.
Second.
There's a motion to approve ordinance 16-19. That motion has been seconded. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that carries unanimously. Michelle, which brings us on to ordinance 16-20, an ordinance rezoning approximately 6.42 acres of land located at 835 West 7th Street in Whitefish, Montana, from County R3, which is their one-family residential, to the Whitefish WR1, which is our one-family residential district, and adopting findings with respect to such rezone.
Okay, so this is the second request this evening from the city of Whitefish to rezone one parcel from County R3 to City WR1. Again, as the mayor stated, it's at 835 West 7th Street. The property totals 6.42 acres. It was annexed on August 6th with Resolution 1649. Again, there's a comparison of the two zones on page 336 of your packet. We did mail notice to the adjacent landowners, placed a legal in the paper on October 5th. Staff is recommending approval of the request. The planning board met on October 20th and considered the requested rezone. We did have one member of the public speak during the public hearing, and it was regarding the potential subdivision possibilities of this property. During that meeting, I informed them that, you know, if there is a future subdivision proposed, there is a separate public process, and they, you know, adjacent landowners would be notified during that time. And we don't, you know, we never know what somebody might do with their property. And I did attach the draft minutes from the October meeting to your packet, and I can answer any questions.
Any questions for Bailey? Not seeing any. We did advertise for a public hearing on ordinance 16-20, and we'll hold that public hearing now. Any comments from the public? Not seeing any. We'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council. Pam, do you have a motion?
I move that we approve ordinance 16-20.
I second.
Further discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that's unanimous as well. Michelle. And we'll move on to, finally, item 6E, which will be ordinance 16-21, an ordinance rezoning approximately 0.39 acres of unaddressed land legally described as parcel C of certificate of survey number 20213 in the southwest quarter of the northwest quarter of section 35, township 31 north, range 22 west in Flathead County, Montana, from county R1 to Whitefish WSR, which is our suburban residential district, and adopting findings with respect to such rezone.
Okay. This is the last one. Again, the City of Whitefish is requesting a rezone on one parcel from County R1 to City WSR. The property, as the mayor stated, it's unaddressed off of Highway 93 West. It's approximately 0.39 acres in size. It was actually annexed on August 15th, 2016. It's under Resolution 1637. Again, on page 360 is a comparison of the districts. We did mail notices to adjacent landowners. We placed a legal in the paper. We are recommending approval of the requested rezone. The planning board met on October 20th, considered the request. No members of the public spoke at that hearing, and again, the draft minutes are attached for your packet. And the planning board did, again, unanimously recommend approval as well. So, any questions?
Thanks, Bailey. Any questions? Not seeing any. Off the hook tonight, Bailey. We did advertise for ordinance 16-21. We'll hold that public hearing now. Any public comments? Not seeing any. I'll close the public hearing. Motion?
I'll move to approve ordinance number 16-21.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Fury. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign. And that again is unanimous, Michelle. Thanks, Bailey. We'll move on to communications from our Public Works Director, Craig Workman. Item 7A, consideration of approving amendment number 7 to the engineering design and management agreement with Anderson Montgomery Consulting Engineers in the amount of $966,825, which will be for the wastewater treatment plant improvements for engineering services up to and including bidding for the construction improvements. Good evening, Craig.
Well said. Thank you. So I'm here to talk to you tonight about amendment number 7 to Anderson Montgomery's contract for our wastewater systems improvement project. This goes back, this original contract actually goes back about 4 years, just over 4 years, to October of 2012 when the contract was first approved by council. As with other engineering contracts, we did start out with a request for qualifications that was advertised, and we went through that process. We interviewed a number of firms and did negotiate the first contract with Anderson Montgomery. There were a number of task orders that were anticipated to be included in this contract. Thus, here we are at amendment number 7 to the contract. So far, we've completed under this contract the renewal of our wastewater permit. We've prepared a compliance plan for the administrative order of consent that was issued by DEQ. We've completed a number of I&I reduction projects, most recently completed last summer. We have completed and submitted the preliminary engineering report as well as a nutrient management plan to DEQ. And we've identified a number of funding sources for these projects, both through grants and low-interest loans through the SRF program. During the original award of the contract back in 2012, there was quite a bit of conversation about the complexity of the project and how it would kind of shape and evolve as we go through this process. Thus, the necessity to sort of hold off negotiations on future contract amendments. But we're now up to the point where we do have the preliminary engineering report approved and submitted to DEQ. We have a really good idea of the system that we're looking to design and construct to maintain compliance with our permit. And so we're now to the point where we can negotiate with and talk to the consultant about designing that plant. The key assignments that will be included in this contract vary from preliminary design to final design. The first portion of the project will involve those preliminary design elements where we'll be doing some survey work out there. Now this site's been surveyed, as you guys can imagine, a number of times. Each survey is, designed to pick up the points and the elevations and the topography for the plan design. And so there is another survey that's required to move into this plant design process. There's also additional geotechnical work that needs to be done as part of that preliminary plan. That'll help us establish the design criteria for the project and help us kind of lay the groundwork for the equipment procurement process, which is also included in this contract. Our goal as we move forward with this wastewater plant design is to try and purchase equipment up front ahead of time, if possible, to save the city money in markup, while still considering the fact that we will want warranties from the company that's installing the equipment, and we need to be careful as we're purchasing equipment that we don't step on our own toes to fumble that ball. So it'll be important that we can identify areas that we can really save ourselves money, but not lose efficiency during the installation process or void warranties on that equipment. It's also important as we look to purchase equipment for this plant that we make sure we dot all of our I's and cross our T's on requirements from the funding agencies. And so one of the important elements that Anderson Montgomery would be paying attention to is those funding agency specifications. Final design services would include all the civil, the structural, the electrical, the instrumentation design that goes along with the wastewater plant of this complexity. It will make sure to incorporate not only the equipment and the construction that goes into the future bidding contract, but also utilizing all of the pre-purchased equipment that we'll have obtained. And then, of course, the project bidding and construction contract award would be included in this. Based on our current schedule and the compliance plan that we've put together, we anticipate that we'll spend, assuming this contract is awarded, the remainder of this year completing the site survey work and getting started on the geotechnical. We will, in an effort to pay for this work, need to go out for an SRF loan, which we anticipate applying for early next year. The preliminary design report would be completed by the end of February 2017, and that'll get us to a point where we can have equipment project documents in April. We would likely then move into the equipment purchase towards the beginning of fiscal year 18, kind of end of summer, have final project documents ready about a little over a year from now in February of 18, and then we'd be bidding the project that spring. So bidding the project in the spring of 2018. As the mayor mentioned, the negotiated fee for this contract amendment number 7 is $966,825. These costs will be paid out of the wastewater fund. We did budget in fiscal 17 $1.961 million, and of course that will require that we are successful in getting the SRF loan to pay for these services. We'll be able to cover a portion of this in cash flow to get us through probably first or second quarter of 2017, and then the SRF loan will kick in. This negotiated fee, I should mention, is about 6.5% of the budgeted construction costs, which we showed in the preliminary engineering report. Those costs were $14.5 million, or about $14.6 million. And this negotiated fee of $966,825 is about $80,000 less than we anticipated when we sent that PER in. So we were able to identify some areas to save some money. We did work pretty hard to make sure that these numbers were in line with industry standard. We talked to other consultants as well as other cities and towns that have recently completed similar projects, and I think that we're in line with what industry would expect for a project like this. So based on those factors, I do recommend council approve amendment number 7 to the wastewater systems improvement consultant agreement with Anderson Montgomery in the amount not to exceed $966,825.
Thanks, Craig. Any questions for Craig? Or can I have a motion?
I'd move to approve amendment number 7 to the wastewater system improvements consultant agreement in an amount not to exceed $966,825.
Thanks, Jen. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Sweeney. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, the like sign, and that's unanimous. Michelle. Thanks, Craig.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item 8, communications from Chuck Stearns, our city manager. You have Chuck's written report and close with the packet. Any questions for Chuck from the council? Not seeing any additional items to report on, Chuck?
Yes, one update on City Hall and parking structure that just notified of it last week's meeting, regular weekly construction meeting. The estimated completion time for the City Hall has slipped by a couple weeks. Earlier was April 7th, and it's now April 21st. The supplier of the interior door frames has delayed delivery by about 2 weeks, and that sets some important things back. You know, it's always possible that they can catch some or all of that time back up, but that's the first movement on the estimated completion date that we've seen in probably 4 to 6 to 8 months. So unfortunate, but wanted to make sure you were aware of that, and we'll keep our eye on it and try to find some ways to accelerate it. We did, even earlier, we've extended the lease of our interim City Hall all the way through April, so that doesn't create terrible problems, but we certainly don't want other delays.
Thanks, Chuck. Any questions? We'll move then on to item 8C, which is consideration of proposals to lease retail/restaurant/office space in the parking structure and to direct the city manager to negotiate a lease for future city council consideration. And just for the record, the two proposals that we received were from Sotheby's Real Estate as well as Pig and Olive, and we have representatives from both entities here present tonight in the audience if the council has any questions for them specifically. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to Chuck now for his staff report.
Sure. My staff report begins on page 411 of the packet, and also our realtor, Chap Godsey, is also in the audience tonight. He's had most of the discussions with the two proposers and helped us quite a bit. I'll just briefly touch on the history. Included in the design of the parking structure was a lease space for retail, restaurant, or office of 2,824 square feet with 2 bathrooms. It's currently unfinished space, with the finishing of the space to be dependent upon negotiations with a possible tenant or tenants. The existing construction contract with Martel Construction provides for finishing the bathrooms, but no concrete floor until electric and plumbing needs are determined. Finished walls on the interior walls are taped but not painted, and electrical connections in the ceiling for lights and electrical connections. Who provides the rest of those improvements is subject to the negotiations. Typically lease spaces are generally finished, and then the tenants come in and paint or rearrange things as they want. But this is a unfinished space, so there's some aspect about negotiations and who will pay what. The downtown master plan had update adopted on April 6, 2015, said a key aspect of the portion of the plan was the desire to activate the corner at First and Baker with ground floor retail space designed to accommodate retail uses that will serve local residents. It's also meant to serve as a retail linkage from Central Avenue to the Railway District to encourage movement back and forth between Central Avenue and the Railway District. The City Council, when they were trying to balance the budget on the City Hall and parking structure, agreed to capitalize $162,000 of those lease payments that we could expect, and thus, for 3 years of tax increment remaining, we probably should get at least $54,000 per year from a lease to repay this capitalization loan. I go on to talk about the two proposals, Sotheby's Glacier, Sotheby International Realty. They would like the entire space of 2,824 square feet in an initial 5-year lease with options to renew for 2 additional 5-year periods. I would just say, the renewals are always subject to negotiations, and the council can give me directions on, automatic renewals or options to renew, depending on which or even either proposal you would decide. Their rate was $19.50 per square foot, which would yield $55,068 annually. The other proposal is from Pig and Olive. They only want half of the space, the eastern half, which is where we have designed kitchen facilities to vent out the third floor of the parking structure. Their rate proposal is $18 a square foot, which was our minimum, and that would yield for half the space $25,416 annually. If there was interest from another vendor, we could always rent the other half, but nothing solid has come forward for the western half of that space. The Real Estate Advisors Group, Mayor Mulfeld, Andy Fury, myself, and Dana Smith met with Chap Godsey on Thursday, October 27th to review the proposals. At the time, they decided not to forward a recommendation, but just to list the strengths and weaknesses or pros and cons of each proposal. I've got that in your packet. I'll just answer questions. I won't go through the strengths and proposals of, or weaknesses of each proposal. There are additional costs to finish the lease space. Really haven't gotten those pinned down too much, but the mechanical engineer estimated $30,000 or $60,000 per side, or $60,000 for HVAC, but Chap, who has done some commercial renovations of his own, and our architect think that's, very, very high. We think it can be, you can heat and ventilate 2,800 square feet for a lot less than that. The mechanical engineer was just using some formulas, but we don't have a better cost estimate until we really start to see what's going to go in there. If a restaurant goes in there, there may be also a cost for the kitchen hood and makeup or replacement air. Patrick Burns of Pig and Olive called me today, and he's got a more detailed cost estimate of that. He said his hood is probably $25,000 to $30,000. We'd have to deal with some makeup air that we'd have to talk to the mechanical engineer and the architect about, but so that $20,000 to $40,000 figure may still stick for that. But there are some costs, additional costs that we have to do regardless of who goes in there. Even if Glacier Sotheby's was to go in there, we have to finish the floor, finish the lighting, and install the HVAC equipment. So that's kind of where we are. It's hard to pin down all the costs until we start negotiating with a potential tenant. So what we're asking you for tonight is just direction to negotiate with one of those two tenants, bearing in mind negotiations always don't result in a finished lease. We would have to bring that proposed lease back to the city council for review and approval. Sometimes you can't reach agreement, a lot of times you can, but we need to kind of get going on finishing the space up before Martell leaves in April. And a lot of time needs to be devoted to ordering equipment, getting proposals, getting costs, etc. So we do want to settle this as soon as possible. If you aren't ready to decide tonight, I'd say you definitely need to decide before December 5th, or we'd lose a whole lot more time. But I can answer any questions on the proposals. Chap Godsey is here as our realtor, and then there are representatives of each proposal here if you have questions or just want any elaboration on their proposals.
Thanks, Chuck. Any questions for Chuck on his report? Frank?
Chuck, I'm failing to see why we have any pressure or time constraints in whether we accept either or both of these. Why? I mean, what difference does it make? I mean, why should I feel compelled to make a decision before December 5th?
Well, I think it's advantageous to have occupants in there in April or May of next year. You have to start getting 3 years of revenue from that space to make up the money you borrowed from TIF for the construction costs. I think you'd be subject to a lot of criticism if the parking structure is finished and you just have a gravel floor in there and there's no concrete floor and there's no finished space. all those things take some time. We have to get cost estimates on the concrete, on the electrical, on the HVAC, and once Martel leaves the site, if those costs aren't finished, then you're hiring another contractor to come in, and that's probably higher than having Martel do it because they're already mobilized on site. So you don't have to, but you may, if you don't start making some decisions soon, you'll have a gravel floor in there come April when you open the parking structure, and no tenants.
Katie?
I would be compelled to not make a decision tonight and delay a little bit longer just to see if we have any more bites, because if we have one side of the space rented out, I'm not saying I'm choosing one or the other, but then that still leaves us with another side of the space that would potentially need a different tenant. And so I think that we could still extend the period a little bit longer and see if there are any other offers out there. But that's my sentiment.
Just for clarification, and maybe you're aware of this, but the Sotheby's proposal is for the entire space and the
Correct,
Pig and,
and
okay.
Right, and so if we were to choose Pig and Olive is for half, I'm not saying that
Okay,
we're choosing one or the other.
Gotcha,
One or other,
okay.
but, right, so
Thanks.
we only have 2 tenants.
Jen and then Chuck?
One of the reasons why we built this space is to help fulfill our downtown master plan, and that portion of the project was meant to activate First Street between Central Avenue and Baker to get pedestrians to cross from Baker over into the railway district. One of those key components being an active storefront with a retail component. What I see here today looks like we maybe have half of that equation. While Sotheby's has a very strong financial proposal with a long-term lease agreement, the other part of that was the pedestrian draw and retail activity. So I feel like at this point we don't necessarily have the full picture, and both leases are attractive, one being, Sotheby's, like I said, long-term, the full space, but Pig and Olive for the kind of business it is and the pedestrian draw that we're looking for. But that's only half of the space, and so I guess I am in no hurry to make a decision tonight to go one way or another until maybe we have a little bit more of that picture drawn out that meets the downtown master plan's goals, which was that active storefront retail aspect. We could have just as easily not put retail space in there, but we did, and so I think we can be a little bit picky about what goes in there. And personally, I'm leaning towards a Pig and Olive, but I don't feel comfortable making a decision until maybe the whole picture is there just yet.
Chuck?
It might be useful to have Chap address the council and answer questions about other prospects. What we heard from him during the meeting is, all of a sudden within town, a lot of commercial property has come under construction, that some of it's currently vacant and some of the people have moved and filled. Right now we had 2 deadlines of the proposals. The first one, Chap may have to remind me, I think was in July, and we wanted to go further and longer. So much to Glacier Sotheby's chagrin, we extended proposals, I think 60 more days, and those all came in, I think, in early October. So I think Chap could answer some questions about whether there are a lot of prospects out there. And I think the other thing to think about is, would you lose either of these prospects if you don't make a decision fairly soon? Now, I'm not saying that means you have to make it tonight, but I certainly think there are a lot of reasons to make the decision before December 5th. But I think it might be useful to have Chap talk about his marketing efforts and the phone calls or lack thereof that he's had in this space. Some of that we thought as the space got further along, there'd be maybe more interest. Certainly as the space is finished, there'd be more interest, but we might have to make a decision, you know, do we finish the space without knowing who the tenants are? Are we putting in a kitchen hood or not? Obviously Glacier Sotheby's doesn't need a kitchen hood and that's a significant cost. So there are just a lot of aspects that we may not know a lot more information before December 5th because we can't get that information until we know who the potential tenants are. So, Chap, I don't know if you want to talk about other responses that you've had and what the status of those are.
The first deadline we had was August 15th, and we had one offer at that point from Glacier Sotheby's. And it was decided at that point, I think we actually were parking property for about 3.5 weeks. So it was decided that it was a pretty short parking period.
Test. Test.
And the decision was made to extend that for another 60 days to see what kind of activity we got in that period. Pig and Olive expressed interest, and obviously they made a proposal as well during that time frame. And relatively recently, there was another business that was interested in the western portion, had discussed making an offer, but haven't done so, or really haven't followed back up. So I don't really know how serious they are about that, and don't know if it's appropriate to really say who they are without their permission either. But it is a local business that would be a good candidate for that space if it was to work out. So I think you do have two good offers to consider. They do vary. Obviously, one's half the space, one's the full space. One's asking for more infrastructure than the other, although one would bring in resort tax where one would not. So they're both good options. It's a little unique for me to try to help you in the discussion or the negotiation because we're not negotiating an offer. You're just discussing whether or not you want to negotiate with one party or the other. And that kind of comes down to your objectives of what would you like in the space or how solid is the lease.
Any questions for Chap? Jen?
If I could, I would like to have both applicants, since they're both here tonight, maybe address the potential pedestrian traffic to their business, the hours of operation, and the days of the week that they might be open.
Who'd like to go first?
Our hours, we would probably be open, I would say 6 days a week, 8 a.m. to 10 or 11 a.m. or 10 or 11 p.m. Just, depending on how that nightlife looks. But I think, if you guys would take us into consideration and maybe, take money off of the plate right now. I think this is really kind of about city planning. And I think that we take a little bit of money, but you're investing that into your city. We really pride ourselves on being a local restaurant that supplies locals with local farmers and local suppliers. I would say out of 11 of just food and beverages that we get from people, 9 of those vendors are locally owned and operated. You know, so for every $12 we get, $9 of that will go right back into your city and trying to support other places, you know, that are operated here. I do think that we would drive some more foot traffic, for sure. We're a big draw on social media for Whitefish. And I do think we could help extend that foot traffic to go down into the railroad district. I mean, people are just going to keep walking and seeing what else is around. And I think we'll benefit other businesses as well. So,
Thanks, Molly.
thank you.
Thank you. Pat?
I'm Pat Donovan. I'm a partner with Glacier Sotheby's, also a broker in our operation. We have a pressing need for office right now. We'd like to consolidate a couple of spaces that are in Whitefish. Our pressure comes solely from the desire to make a decision and make something happen for our business. And our business isn't, you know, I mean, we have a big flagship name, which is just a group of people, 20 or 30 local brokers selling properties all located in Whitefish and the surrounding areas, of course. Selling homes for people that own homes in Whitefish, trying to get the best deal we can for them. So it's all local. I mean, I think that goes without saying. We'd like to put 20 or 30 brokers, agents in that office. Real estate offices aren't like attorney's offices where people are there all day. Monday morning, we're busy. We're open every day from 8:30 to 5:30 or so, except Sunday. Sunday's by appointment only. The business is more, this location would be more a showcase location where we showcase properties, more of a, I don't want to say gallery, but a real estate viewing area, and then also an area where people come in and schedule meetings. It's been real successful in our location across the street, which just isn't big enough for us. So what we'd like to do is we'd like to make some decisions, get some leases, consolidate some space. We've passed on a couple of spaces hoping this would come available. It's not the end of the world either way for us, but we would really like to be there. We think it's a great location. I think it's a tough retail location. Personally, I did retail for years. I just think it's a difficult location in terms of accessibility, walking traffic. If you look back at the first Carandala study, they spoke to that and the issues about trying to pull people down that side street, being equivalent to kind of a mall type situation. But we're super high on the location. I think it's great real estate. You've done a great job with the building. I think it all looks good. So we'd just like to kind of get a direction. You know, if there are people here who would rather do a restaurant just because I'm not offended, we're not offended, we'd just like a kind of a nod one way or another. And if the nod is no, we can move on. You know, we're capable of being just about anywhere. So thanks for your time. Appreciate your consideration too. I know it's not an easy decision.
Yeah, thanks, Pat. Appreciate your comments. Jen?
Well, personally, I appreciate the offer of Sotheby's. I have a hard time connecting how it fits within the master plan. And like I said before, my preference is leaning towards a pig and olive. I'd like to see those kinds of businesses grow in Whitefish, and it may cost a little bit more to get it going, but it feels to me more of the right thing to do, and fits within the master plan a little more. We just need to find the other piece. So if we need to wait to decide until next meeting, fine, but at least you know where I'm leaning.
Was that a motion for direction?
Sure. Yes.
Just trying to move this along, and if that's the council's prerogative in terms of the type of use for that space, I think Pat's been, very, patient and, understanding that if that's the direction the council wants to go with this, they understand. So I think it's important that we be a bit responsive to, Glacier Sotheby's tonight, because they have been patient. With that motion, I didn't ask if there was a second. Is there a second in support of Jen's direction?
Could you clarify your direction so that I can?
How about I state it formally? I would ask staff to proceed with negotiations with Pig and Olive and continue to look for an additional tenant for the other half of the space.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Fury. Jen, you've already spoke to your motion. Any additional comments? Or Andy, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I've got a number of comments, I guess. First of all, because they were part of the packet, I'm going to comment on Mr. Stinson's emails to us. I'm going to comment on his phone conversations with city staff and the mayor. And I thought it rather fitting tonight that the mayor read our principles of civil dialogue that were adopted in 2/20/2007, and I would like to suggest that Mr. Stinson possibly read those and conduct himself with those principles in mind when dealing with people that either sit up here or work for our city in the future. And that's all I'll say about that. Despite that, I did not allow that to cloud my opinion of what we're trying to do here and what we should be. And I want to thank Pat and Ross especially, because I know he worked on it. It's a great proposal, obviously very financially attractive to us, but I think that there wouldn't be a retail space there had we not wanted it to be a retail space. And I think to fulfill the principles and the goals of the downtown master plan, I think we'd be remiss in our duties if we didn't put something in a retail space in there. And I'll give you a rather anecdotal message about what goes on there. And I had a friend who had a business over on Lupfer, and this is a couple of years ago, and he said, you know, I might as well be in Eureka. And that's a true statement, and I think that we do lose foot traffic, and we're going to be part of that problem because we create a big dead space on Second, and the bank creates a big dead space on Second. And Pat, you may be right. I mean, how much retail draws down there, I don't know, but I think that is one of our goals, and I think it's one of the things that activating corners is used for, and I think we need to at least try that and see that happens. So I guess I'd have to say that we really do need to respect what we've done in the downtown master plan. I think it's served us pretty well so far, and I guess that's about all I have to say.
Thanks, Andy. Frank?
I guess I would, again, for Pat, for your purposes in terms of direction, where I'm sitting and where I come down is where Andy is. The design of the City Hall and the whole purpose of what we were doing at City Hall was all predicated on what the community wanted in the master plan and its inputs. It was always called for retail space on that corner to activate that edge and do what we could to help the railway district and make it grow. I think we have to stay true to that because that's why we created it and that's why we put it there. So as attractive as the offer is and as solid a citizen as Sotheby's is, I don't think they fit with the master plan and what we want for, or what I want to see, or what we think we need to see in that space. So if that gives you direction and help, I think that's fair for us to do. I would also say I like the idea of whatever we can do to create traffic on there and to make it a retail edge, which is the design. I have some hesitations about Pig and Olive. Restaurant doesn't offend me. I think the economics of their offer are a little challenging for the space that we have there. And so if we're going to pursue discussions with them, I think we need to focus a little bit more on the economics of it and the payback and how we bring that offer more in line with the level of the offer that we have from Sotheby's would be my direction. I think we owe it to that building, we owe it to that space, we owe it to the citizens of Whitefish to do what we can to have that retail space pay for itself. And so that would, to the extent you want direction from me, and if we're going to pursue any kind of a lease from Pig and Olive, I think that's a tact we ought to look at. The other piece of it is I would also like to, if we're going to do that, I think it's very important that we not lose sight of the fact that we, by leasing half of the space, if we don't have a commensurate offer for the other half, we limit the number of potential tenants for that space. and the economic payback. So I think we need to activate ourselves in the process of negotiating for, if we're going to negotiate for half of the space, before we signed it, I would darn sure like to know that we have somebody that we're going to put in that other half of the space so that we've got it fully leased. Because I think we do limit our market in many respects by just leasing half of it at one time. That's my feeling. And in terms of directions, that's what I would like to offer.
Thanks, Frank. Jen?
As far as the economics and payback aspect goes, I'm not nearly as concerned possibly as you are, Frank. I think that our payback comes in having parts of our community that have better business just because of the traffic that's flowing through there. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. So I'm not nearly as concerned as trying to find a match for a different proposal. I'm also not nearly as concerned of trying to find another tenant right away. I think that any given point during the term of the life of the space, we're gonna have tenants come and go, and there will be times when it's empty. And you know, for the right people, we may have to wait a little bit, and I'm okay with that. Especially if they turn out to be good tenants. So I am maybe not as willing to direct to do some of the things that you're concerned with.
Thanks, Jen. Further comments on the motion?
Can you restate the motion, please?
To direct staff to negotiate with Pig and Olive and to continue to search for an additional tenant for the other half of the space.
Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that's unanimous as well. Thank you both for your time this evening. Pat, thanks. Chappie, thanks again. We have an email from Scott Countryman regarding a noise ordinance in Whitefish. We've seen this on multiple occasions over the last 5 to 10 years. Any comments, particularly in light of tonight's decision for the Firebrand Hotel? Jen?
All I would say is that I think it's important that the public does know that we have a noise ordinance, and you know, in this particular case, the police chief was right in his response that it's been several times that this has been an issue and it needs to be dealt with, and so deal with it.
Any other comments? Thanks, Jen. We did not make our Housing Authority appointments this evening because we didn't have anyone show up for interviews, so I imagine those will be rescheduled to December 5th. Is that correct?
One dropped out completely.
Oh, one dropped out, okay. So we're gonna continue re-advertising. Okay. Thanks, Michelle. We'll start with councilor comments, and who would like to begin? Pam, anything this evening?
Do. During our retreat last week, we discussed asking Angie to draft a resolution for our next meeting, December 5th, to form a 7-person citizen task force to develop a Whitefish climate action plan. The task force would work with city staff, including our Energy Corps member, Rachel Sussman, who's currently starting on an energy audit for the city. The task force would also work with a Climate Smart Glacier Country Partnership to evaluate city's energy use and propose specific projects, benchmarks, and other recommendations to conserve energy in Whitefish. The task force may also propose actions to enhance community resilience and prepare for the effects of climate change.
We'll just need a showing of hands. This was thoroughly vetted at our retreat, but those interested, please raise your hand. And I imagine, Pam, can you meet with Angie? I'm sure she's going to need some additional information to create that ad hoc committee. So if you wouldn't mind, and possibly Richard as well, that'd be a big help. Thanks, Pam. Katie.
I would just like to remind everyone that on Monday, December 5th, there will be a noon luncheon at the O'Shaughnessy Center for the presentation for the Affordable Workforce Housing Needs Assessment, followed, and this was in Chuck's memo, by a shorter presentation that night at the council work session. So this is the unveiling of phase 1 of the Affordable Workforce Housing Needs Assessment.
Great, thanks, Katie. Jen?
A couple of things. First was, it came to my attention that the City Hall had, was a cornerstone of the, what is that piece at the very bottom? The cement cornerstone, that the first one that went in on the southeast corner of the building was delivered chipped, and instead of being replaced, it was put in and with an opportunity to repair. And I just wanted to make sure that, or check in with Chuck to see if that would be repaired and the warranty would still be applied as if it were delivered correctly. And if it's repaired and it does not look like new, if we could get the replacement in prior to opening the building.
So basically, you know, under, I guess, construction law and Martell's contracts, they are given an opportunity to try to remedy the chip, and then if that's not acceptable to the city, which basically would be myself and Mike Cronquist, but you know, we'd listen to opinions, then we can make them replace it. The timing of that, you know, that those pieces took a long time to come in, so I'll mention it to Martell at this week's, well, we're not meeting this week because of the short week, but next week meeting to see what their timing is on the patch and repair. But when those things are delivered, the same company delivers to the contractor patch kits that are supposed to, you know, be the same shading and all of that. But that will be the determination once they get that done. But I'll try to check in what the timing of that patch will be so that we know. But it does have to be acceptable to us, but we can't be
unreasonable
in what we can accept, so.
Of course. Thank you.
Chuck, can I just follow up on that? Along those lines, you indicated it would ultimately be to your discretion and Mike's. Are you going to seek our input on that?
Yeah, I mean, beginning tonight.
Okay, in terms of our acceptance of the patch.
Right.
I would hope that we have an opportunity to review that once it is complete, and if, you know, we could provide you feedback, and ultimately, if it is your, you know, decision or Mike's. I do know Mike went into that construction meeting indicating he was going to require a replacement. I mean, that was the last discussion I had with him. So.
Well, I think he was informed of, you know, Martell's ability to have a remedy under the contract, but so I think we're kind of working through all those issues.
That's fine, as long as we could have an opportunity to look at the patch job when it's complete.
Mm-hmm.
Jen, sorry to interrupt.
And then the second thing was, in public comment tonight, Jan Metzmaker brought up the concern about an evacuation plan and what that would be, and I was wondering if Chief Page, if you're still back there, if you might be able to just do a quick address to that, and maybe if there is a way to maybe get on our website just some pretty basic information for residents in regard to where they would go in case of an emergency for information in that regard.
Sure. Back in April 2015, I did a presentation which was more geared, or at least triggered by the back and oil concerns. And in there we addressed all the uncertainties of an incident, which way the wind is blowing, what is the incident, what chemicals involved, if it's a hazmat. And the fact that until you have an incident, you don't know exactly what you're going to need to do, which direction to send people. So saying if you hear the siren, is when the siren gets hooked up again, go here, we could be sending them right into the wrong area. So it's got to be a per incident decision made by the incident commanders responding. That presentation is on the website still, and I'd be happy to meet with the homeowners down there and go through it again if they'd like. There's just a lot of decisions to be made
Yeah.
at the time.
And like you said, I think every incident is different and requires different measures. The one thing that maybe I would like to see, if it's okay with the rest of the councilors, is trying to find a way to get on the city website. In case of certain kinds of emergencies, here's where you'll find information instead of passing rumors around on Facebook, perhaps.
If we did have an incident, we'd be working with the county incident management team. They have a type 3 incident management team, and they have a PIO, public information officer, who would have a website set up. So we can get that out there in an emergency. And actually the link to that website is on our website also, down to the county. And they would stand up people to do the public information and announcements. So there
Thank you,
is a
Chief.
mechanism there. So.
Thanks.
Chuck?
For Chief Page, granted, there's uncertainty on each type of incident, but is it fair to say that often, or unless otherwise directed, the general strategy is to shelter in place?
Yeah, we would probably ask them to shelter in place before getting out into the area. But there are going to be times when it's, there's the big explosion back in oil. Hopefully people will be smart enough to move away from that stuff. The big problem when you get into, say, the back in oil is the smoke coming off those fires is very acidic. So at that point, yes, sheltering in place, but then we have to work on getting those people evacuated from there. So.
Joe, while I have you here, I may have been remiss when I did not ask for your participation in the selection of our next city manager, and I regret that. It wasn't intentional. It never was intended at the onset to be just representatives from department heads, which is why Justin Woods was asked to represent the union. But the more I've thought about it, if you are available, we'd certainly appreciate your input, and we'll be meeting with the candidates on the 16th of December here in this room for staff at large and city council interviews. So you're certainly welcome, and I'd encourage you to attend, and hope you can make it.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'll let Sherry know to include you on the correspondence. I've been meaning to reach out. I've just been a bit busy.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Thanks, Chief. Anything further, Jen?
I think that's all I have.
Frank?
I won't beat a dead horse much longer, but Chuck, the other concern I've got about a patch and repair, and I understand where that comes from. My concern is, and I think Jen was maybe getting this with the warranty issue, is that my experience with many of those things when they're manufactured or patched at a later time from the original manufacturer, they wear quite differently over time, and so that the differences in color or texture or anything else that might show up may take several years, and I don't want us to lose the ability to have that thing replaced if we're going to accept, at least in the short term, a patch. And I think that's fair because it was non-conforming when it was delivered.
Right. Yeah. Basically, when we did the construction contract, we decided not to pay extra money for a 2-year warranty, so we are limited to a 1-year warranty. So that determination, may have to be made before people are ready to make it. But I recognize the comment you made about it wears differently and ages differently. And we'll talk to them, and sooner or later, maybe the next manager gets to make that call.
Or we can't. We can do that.
Andy?
First thing, I don't think that we asked either Wendy or Angie to provide another findings of fact to support an approval of the hot tub.
I think we did. It was part of the original motion.
I don't know that we actually did, but did we? Are we sure? Okay, all right.
Well, I was going to actually ask you to clarify that too.
Okay,
So.
yeah, I didn't
I think Jen made the original motion. It was seconded by, I think, Andy, and then I made the comment if the first and second would be open to that. So.
I didn't make any motions to that issue.
I didn't say your name.
Kind of got a little
Did
long
I?
there.
Katie and Andy.
Got long enough there that I kind of forgot. I guess I lost my way. Just one really quick thing. I just want to remind people that bears are still out, garbage cans are still getting tipped over, and probably even more now that all of the apples are off the trees, so.
I had one at my work Thursday night.
Yeah, they're out, they're still there.
Yeah. Frank?
It only looks like winter.
John, I just, given our earlier discussion in our work session, I just, as a preview to the extent we can provide any heads up, one of the things that we've added to, or asked to be added to our agenda for the next meeting will be a public discussion of the proposal for what I'll call a zoning change or plans for the 93 South Corridor that's been proposed by some of the property owners that are along that corridor. In discussions with them this evening, they're open to and would like to have some public input from the city of Whitefish and its citizens and anybody interested about their proposal. It will be in the packet, and I think they can have access to it at any point. We're hoping that at that meeting that the proponents of that plan, which is a planner and one of the citizens and owners of the property on 93 South, will be here to answer any questions of the public and take your input. And so I'm hopeful that this gives everybody a little bit more of a heads up than just walking for our agenda for next month, because we really would like to have the citizens of Whitefish weigh in on this. So, thank you.
On that note, Wendy, would it be possible for you to reach out to Dave and ask if he'd be willing to give a short PowerPoint presentation as part of the public hearing? That'd be great. Appreciate it. Thanks, Frank.
Do we need to have a formal show of hands of support to put that on the agenda?
Not really. I mean, I took it in the work session, and
Okay.
I can do that because I recognize, the importance of it. So.
Thanks, Chuck.
It's that time of year for our annual Salvation Army Kettle Drive. So it will be on December 15th, I believe, which is a Thursday. And it's going to run from 10 to 6. And for those who haven't participated in the past years, we've had staff and council attend. We've typically done 4 2-hour shifts, one starting at 10, ending at 6 p.m. It's in front of Super One, and we typically double up on this. Chuck's volunteered to cover the 4 to 6 shift, I believe. We'll need one more individual to join him. It can, if it's okay with Chuck, it could either be a staff member or a counselor.
Yeah, in the past, I've done it myself, which isn't a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's never that much fun.
But I recognize this year you've got
The
a
interview.
meeting at Casey's with city manager candidates, I think beginning at 6.
That's right.
And so I would not expect any council person to, go right from cold bell ringing to the Casey's. So I'm fine, but if there is a staff person, I'll ask at tomorrow's staff meeting.
Okay. I don't want to put you on the spot tonight.
I'm probably out there by myself, which has been the case the last 2 or 3 years. So
Bummer.
it's okay.
Okay. Anyway, I signed up for the 10 to 12 shift. Does anyone want to join me?
I'll join you.
Okay. Pam, do you want to take the 12 to 2 shift? Okay. Anyone willing to join Pam?
I can.
Katie. And 2 to 4.
I'll take it.
Okay. And if folks want to volunteer in the next couple of days, you're gone. I knew you were gone. Maybe we could find 2 staff members, Chuck. One would be from 2 to 4, and then the 4 to 6 shift. So.
You haven't volunteered.
Richard? Oh, we have to volunteer Richard, actually.
As an
So
absent member, he gets volunteered.
we're going to put Richard with Jen from 2 to 4. He gets pretty into it.
Costumes help. Terry and I found out last year costumes help. It brings up your total.
So just a 4 to 6 staff member to join Chuck. And on that note, thank you, and we're adjourned.